All right, going live now.
So, Representative Dodge, I see you have a Michigan in the back.
That's specifically for Representative Crockett, who has brought back those feelings you have about your alma mater.
I assumed that was the case.
All right, letting the commissioner in now.
So we're live now?
Yes, Representative.
Right. Thank you. Good morning to members of the public. This is a meeting presentation before the Joint Committee on Education and Cultural Affairs. And we welcome the Commissioner of Education, Commissioner Makem, who is good morning, Commissioner. Good to see you. And before we get started with your presentation, we just wanted to do introductions from members of the committee. And I will start with myself. I'm Michael Brennan. I represent District 36, which is part of Portland. And I'd ask Senator Rafferty to introduce himself. You're on mute. You're on mute. There you go. Okay.
Thank you very much. No, my apologies, but thanks very much. And good morning, folks. My name is Joe Rafferty. I am in Senate District 34, which encompasses Acton, Lebanon, Berwick, North Berwick, Wells, and Kennebunk. Thank you.
Thank you. And Representative Millett.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Rebecca Millett. I represent House District 30, which is most of Cape Elizabeth.
And Representative McCray.
Yes, good morning, everybody. Coming to you from sunny Fort Fairfield up in the county, representing District 148. Good morning.
And Representative Dodge.
Good morning, Jan Dodge, House District 97, Belfast, Northport, and Waldo. Thank you for being here, Commissioner.
And Representative Salisbury.
Good morning, I'm Sue Salisbury, and I represent House District 35, which is part of Westbrook.
Great. And Representative Stearns.
Good morning, my name is Paul Stearns. I represent House District 119, which consists of 12 towns in the unorganized territories of Piscataquis County.
Great. And Representative Lyman.
Good morning, Sheila Lyman. I'm coming to you from Augusta. I represent District 74, J, Livermore Falls, and part of Livermore. Thank you.
Great. And Representative Roach.
Good morning, everyone. Representative Tim Roach from the town of Wells, District 7.
Thank you. So, Commissioner, thank you very much for making time to be here today. I know it's all short notice, but obviously things changed quite a bit in terms of vaccination policy in the state last Friday, and they've continued to evolve and change as we speak. And so we wanted to have you come today and give us the latest update in terms of what's happening with vaccination with school personnel across the state of Maine. And I will just say for members of the public, this is not a public hearing. We'll not be taking public comment. This is basically an informational hearing for the committee in regards to the state's policy in vaccinating school personnel, which, as I already mentioned, has changed quite a bit in the last several days. So, Commissioner, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Representative Brennan, and esteemed members of the Education Committee. Thanks for having me here this morning. I'm going to just give you the very brief history and timeline of where we're at right now with vaccinations as they apply to school staff. First of all, last Friday, as you know, the Mills administration, we announced a prioritization based on age for the reasons that scientific evidence shows undeniably that the people who are most at risk of death and of serious complications or hospitalization from COVID are those who are older. And that holds up against every other possible demographic and work sector, as was eloquently provided to all of us by Dr. Shah last week. At the same time, because our state also prioritizes the education workforce, and we certainly wanted to make sure that there was priority provided for educators, we decided that we would create age-specific school workforce, educator workforce, designated clinics that would be provided for all school staff members in the state of Maine, ages 60 and older. And that those would be, our analogy was it would be like the TSA quick check line. We're all going to get on the same same plane, but this was going to be a streamlined opportunity where the 60 and older educators would be able to sign up for an appointment at a designated clinic without having to hope that there was availability of space or click refresh, like, you know, how when there is a limited supply. And again, I guess it's important to reiterate what we've heard on the news yesterday and in Dr. Shah's update to the state in the press briefing. We're receiving actually fewer doses next week than certainly than we expected, and fewer than we received this week. And that's the same situation faced by every state in the nation. So we wanted to be sure that there would be enough vaccine and enough availability and providers across the state in equitably accessible geographic locations. And the team at CDC and DHHS and my team at DOE have worked tirelessly to set these clinics up statewide. And they would be anybody who was already on a pre-approved list, which we keep at the department. We have a database of school staff from all approved education settings, and anybody who was 60 or older would be on that eligible list. And we were matching up those numbers with available doses and with available providers in geographically convenient locations. Those clinics are set up, and there are just a few final details that we are working on right now before releasing registration links and directions for accessing those clinics. I can tell you they are planned for the weekend of a week from today. So the actual vaccinations are intended to happen on the 12th, 13th, and or 14th at locations across the state. Those times of availability will vary from region to region because it's a number of various providers who are offering these clinics. So it'll look a little different in each place. People will not necessarily be able to choose, oh, I'd rather go Friday night or Sunday morning, but they would be guaranteed a slot within that weekend for these doses. That is the way the plan is working out right now. So after working all weekend, and those are set up, on Tuesday, we received word late in the day from the Biden administration that all pre-K, elementary school, and secondary school educators are immediately eligible for vaccination at any location that receives federally procured vaccine doses. Also included in that would be childcare workers. Those are licensed childcare providers and people who work for licensed childcare providers. So that happened on Tuesday evening, and our DHHS put out their guidance. They linked to the Biden administration mandate that all of these must be available and these folks are eligible immediately. They also mentioned that we have existing clinics set up based on the age banding that was previously set into motion, and that those clinics would continue to be offered and honored as planned, and that is happening. So also, our state is continuing the eligibility of those 60 and older, whether or not they work in the education workforce. So if you're 60 or older in the state of Maine, you're eligible to receive vaccine once it becomes available at a healthcare provider near you. If you're an educator or a childcare provider in the state of Maine, you also are eligible to receive a vaccine in the state of Maine at any any provider that is offering such a clinic. Now, there's one caveat, and that is the Biden administration selected a few retail partners. These are, in Maine, 3 pharmacies. It would be Walmart Pharmacy, Walgreens Pharmacy, and Hannaford Pharmacy. For those retail partners here in Maine and across the nation, a similar swath of retail partners were designated. They may only provide their federally procured vaccine doses to school staff or child care workers. So to be clear, child care workers and school staff, we are hoping, here's the hope, they're eligible to receive vaccine anywhere in the state of Maine right now. We hope that they will largely focus on those designated clinics at the pharmacies, because we do have the other clinics for those who are in the age band risk categories that are offered at other places, other healthcare providers across the state. And so in a great world where we all work together, that would provide the largest availability for the most people who are deserving and in need of these vaccines. We are completing our guidance today, I believe, for the designated 60 years old and older educator workforce vaccine clinics that we have been planning since last Friday, and the specific times, dates, locations, and designated links for registration will be made available to superintendents later today, and they will be able to share those with their staff members to sign up over the weekend. And again, this is a sign up that is intended to be free of competition or first come, first serve, but rather the doses will be available for those who choose to access this particular clinic. That was the original intent. So they weren't having educators vying for a place in line, with other 60 and older people. We don't have any more details on that just yet, but I do know that the team, again, has been working sleepless nights and all day, every day to make sure that these clinics are up and ready to provide a streamlined opportunity for the 60 years old and older education workforce in the state. Would you like me to recap any of the major bullets, or did I articulate all this well enough? Because I think this is about the extent of my information.
Okay. Commissioner, I guess I would just ask, you said this is all going to be finalized later today?
This all being the one set of designated clinics for 60-year-old educators and older. Yes, that set of clinics will be finalized later today, and we'll be sending information out to the field soon.
With that information, would you just make sure that it's sent to our staff, to Hillary Risler, who could then convey that to us?
Yes, we'll have to do some, because we're trying to keep very secret the registration links for each of these locations, so it'll probably take a whole different mail merge, but we will certainly send you the times, the dates, and the locations where those 60 and over school staff clinics will be held across the state. Yes.
That would be very helpful. And just so I understand what you're saying is that you're moving forward almost immediately on all school staff and childcare workers who are over 60. And then sometime in the very near future, there will be a plan that will be articulated in some way, shape, or form to then vaccinate, quote, everybody else?
So currently, the plan to vaccinate everybody else, by which we mean all the licensed child care providers, workers in licensed child care centers, and pre-K, elementary, and secondary education settings, all of those workers. The plan around that is that they don't need special dispensation, they don't need a special go-ahead or a procurement by a state agency even necessarily of an appointment for them. They can reach out to the nearest, most convenient Walgreens, Walmart, or Hannaford pharmacy and get on those lists as soon as they become available. Now, again, they can only become available once more doses of vaccine reach our state. So So we have a set of possibly, conflicting situations whereby everyone over 60 is eligible to receive a vaccine in our state. Everyone who works in childcare or education is eligible already today to receive a vaccine, and many, by the way, I'm delighted to say, in a very streamlined, quiet, and efficient way, have reached out as of I think it was Wednesday when many of the portals opened up. They registered, they got an appointment, and they've gone in and they've already had their first vaccination. That has happened seamlessly, and it could be happening today. In terms of finding and warehousing and making available information about where these are available so that people can, quickly access. We have a team we are working with the pharmacies to find out when you're going to have enough to be opening it up for registration, and some already, I believe, are. And I know that many healthcare agencies have been reaching out to schools and saying, hey, bring your staff in this weekend and we can make something happen there. All of that is completely dependent upon the private or independent service providing agencies. So we've got hospitals and healthcare agencies who may or may not currently have doses and available staff to provide it. Those who have it are reaching out as we speak to offer these opportunities to school staff. And again, those over 60 in Maine who are not part of the school staff workforce or the childcare workforce, if you have already signed up for a clinic somewhere in the state of Maine, that is fully on and going to be honored. So you're all set and you're in. Those of you who have yet to sign up, you should be able to sign up in any healthcare provider that is offering the vaccinations going forward. Other than those designated, we do have the designated clinics for the 60 and older education workforce scheduled for next weekend.
All right, thank you. Commissioner, there are several questions from members of the committee, and I have Representative McCray, Representative Roach, and Representative Crockett.
Yes, good morning. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Commissioner Macon, for being here and putting yourself through this. This is a little bit like kicking a hornet's nest, I realize that. But my question is, I have constituent friends that are in education, that are active teachers that got appointments yesterday afternoon. I have others that have checked even all statewide. I have teacher friends in the southern part of the state, and there appear to be no appointments at the Walgreens and Walmart and Hannaford at this point. Now, should they just keep checking and checking and checking? I mean, they do have to keep living, but they don't want to miss their chance. So is this just, would you recommend checking every hour or two, or will there be nothing until Monday or whatever?
I would recommend, checking at a reasonable pace without interfering with your daily life. We are no longer talking about a matter of months before educators and others in our state are going to be vaccinated. We're looking at a matter of weeks, and we've all been doing so well thus far. I think people can get very overly concerned about, being the first one in or in the first slots of doses. However, I would urge people to live their lives, be very safe, continue the masking, the social distancing, and to check when it's convenient to check. Also, to supplement that work, we do have our communications team working with CDC and DHHS to find out, which are the pharmacies that will be offering it. And it's very hard for us to predict. In fact, we can't predict. We have no idea how much vaccine is coming and to whom it will be allocated from week to week. So, and that's not in the knowledge base of anybody right now. Sorry. But to the best of our ability, we will make available information about opening clinics, opening opportunities when we know about those.
Thank you very much, and we'll stay tuned.
Thank you. Representative Roach.
Thank you. I guess my question is going to be about dissemination of information. At 3:47 yesterday, the superintendents, at least down here this way, received an email from the MEA explaining how this was all going to be developed. I would appreciate, and that these links were going to be out there. As soon as that happened, the superintendents down here got inundated with emails and calls from teachers saying, where's my link? Where's my link? Where's my link? the information should really be coming from our Department of Education, not from the MEA, to our superintendents to do these things. It creates a complete fiasco in these places because all they're doing now, they have no idea what the answer is. There's no links. There's nothing there for the superintendents. It shouldn't be the MEA. We really should be getting this from the Department of Education. And, you've created not you personally, we've created a situation where these teachers are now mad at the superintendents because it says right here, you have a link. We don't have any links. There's no links. And I've heard from numerous superintendents down here today saying, what's going on? Why is this happening?
Point taken, Representative. And we have been working so hard with all the superintendents. We meet with them every week. They're regional groups. We, the Department of Education, I mean.
Yeah.
We don't have any jurisdiction over the MEA. They're an advocacy group that work on behalf of educators. And they don't take directives from the Department of Education, certainly. So we did not ask them to be reaching out, nor do we have control to inhibit that type of outreach. We are, however, constantly in communication with all of the superintendents in the state of Maine. Every single week, we are face-to-face with them on a Zoom like this. And we do it in regional groups, so everyone has an opportunity to ask questions and so forth. We also have almost daily at this point communications in the form of something called a priority notice from the Department of Education, where we are making available the most updated, accurate, and official information that we can share with them. I'm very sorry about the situation. I would say you point out that superintendents, yes, they are hearing from staff members, where's our link, and that somehow they're responsible for getting everybody vaccinated, when in fact these are going to be open to the community of educators at large, at their local pharmacies and at healthcare providers across the state. In some districts, the school district coordinates such things as flu shot clinics, and in other districts, people just get those flu shots from their healthcare providers or a nearby Hannaford pharmacy. Those different ways of doing things in various communities have been formed over years with, they're different. There's not an expectation that superintendents get their staff vaccinated. Rather, the staff are going to be also informed in an ongoing way by the department to make sure that they're informed, they know where and when the clinics will be, and they should be signing up unless their superintendents or school boards or other administrators have reached out to say, hey, we're going to organize a clinic if you'd like to join it. And so that it is handled in a very local way by each region. The superintendents are answerable to their staff, to the family members, to the school boards. I mean, they're right in the crosshairs of this. And we're doing all we can as a department to make sure that the public is aware that we're providing the best information as quickly as it becomes available. And this is a very dynamic, as you can see, and changing situation.
Okay.
We'll keep everyone updated in real time.
I follow up,
Sure.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. And thank you for that answer. I guess my issue is, how would the MEA know before the superintendents know? To me, that I like things personally to go in order, and it really should go to the superintendents before it goes to anyone. My second point is, you just said a superintendent can organize. I will tell you right now at Wells, and my guess is Joe over in Kennebunk, if you can send us 300 doses, my superintendent will organize a clinic in a second and have it done with our nurse. That would happen by 4 o'clock today. If you got us a dose at noon, we'd be done with everyone. And that would be a very efficient way. But I guess my question is more on how did it get to the MEA before it got to the supers? Because now it's created a real issue.
That is a question, unfortunately, I can't answer. We do not communicate directly to the MEA before anybody else. We put out public information, and on occasion we'll send out embargoed information to the superintendents and school boards that they need to know ahead of time. But we do not have a communication chain from the Department of Education to the MEA that is in advance of or separate from or prioritized above communication to the superintendents. We meet with all of them together in one. In fact, I met with the MEA and a superintendent's group in one room yesterday morning. We do that every Thursday morning with all of the different stakeholder organization leads. every single Thursday morning. So we're not prioritizing. That didn't come from us. And also when you mention how did we, if we would just make available 400 doses in Kennebunk, you guys could fill them with a school. The Department of Education doesn't receive, procure, or have any influence whatsoever over the number of doses that come into our state or to where they may be allocated. I wish we had that level of control, but that is way outside of our capacity, or we don't have any authority there.
No, I understand that, but I thought you said if a superintendent wanted to schedule a health clinic to do that, they could. I thought you said that.
Oh, they can. I mean, so it's happening in real time right now. So a local healthcare provider may be reaching out to the superintendent, as we speak, saying, hey, would you like to bring your staff in on Saturday or Sunday? The problem, and why would a superintendent, by the way, not make use of that option? They might just go ahead and do so. The problem is there's nowhere near enough vaccine doses right now in our state for everyone to be able to do that. And so it creates a pretty large inequity based on, just whoever. So we would hope, I guess what we're hoping is that educators would be encouraged to connect with their local pharmacies, the Walgreens one, the Walmart one, and the Hannaford one, to schedule those appointments that are exclusively, they're like a whole set of vaccines held aside for education and childcare workforce. And then there's these other clinics that we need to share across the education workforce and the prioritized 60 and older people in our state. So yes, in some cases, there are organized clinics being set up in real time, just by a phone call this morning, even. We, again, at the Department of Education, these are independent healthcare providers. They may or may not have doses. They may or may not have staffing and may or may not be open this weekend or next Tuesday evening or whatever it might be. But if they do have doses, staffing, and they're open, and they don't have slots taken up, they may be reaching out to schools, is what we're hearing. Actually, we know for sure they're reaching out to schools independently. They have the right to do so. They're private businesses and they have a product to dispense. And so that's what they're doing, because it is now, we now have eligibility that's wide open for all education workforce.
All right, I have Representative Crockett, Representative Millette, and Representative Stearns. Representative Crockett.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to commend you and your team. You've been kind of handed a crap sandwich over the last few hours, and it's obvious you guys are scrambling and doing everything you can to make this right. And I encourage you to keep your head up and keep plowing forward on that. I also want to encourage the department to look a little bit further ahead with respect to communication. We know the end result of the push for teachers to get vaccinated was to get the kids back in school as quickly as possible. And although there are a lot of variables there, ideally have them all back full time. If we could get as timely a possible communication on what that plan looks like, and I understand there's so many variables right now that make it almost impossible, but the quicker that communication gets out, I think the bombardment of questions your way will be eased somewhat. So that's just a recommendation I wanted to throw out there.
I appreciate that. And I just want to be clear that at this time, there's no indication that vaccinating all teachers will necessarily reduce the requirement of the 3 to 6 feet of social distancing, because right now at the federal level, the social distancing is being emphasized as well. So the minute we think there may be a change to that, we will absolutely, and not only that, will be involving superintendents, school boards, teachers, and parent groups, and everybody else involved in the big bundle that is education, to help support the redevelopment of our framework for safely operating within the context of a pandemic. So more to come on that, and I will absolutely promise you that we'll try to be as far ahead of communication as is absolutely is possible.
Thank you. Representative Millette.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First a thought and then a question. And also a thank you to you, Commissioner, and everyone in the department. I can't imagine having everything figured out based on the directive from the governor on the rollout of vaccinations and then have it literally flipped on its head within 24 hours. And so your team's ability to quickly redirect is inspiring. And I do wish everyone all the best. But I'm particularly relieved for our teachers. And you know, I understand Representative Roach's frustration about the deluge of emails coming from educators, but imagine if you have been, and Representative Roach, I know you can, been told over and over again that you're absolutely critical, you're a frontline worker, you're essential, to then find out fairly recently that that's not going to transfer into the vaccination plan, which really created a substantial amount of distress. And I know there have been a number of quite a deluge of emails sent to policymakers as well as the Education Association. And if I were the Education Association and I knew that there was a plan to help get educators vaccinated, I would have shared that information. I haven't seen the email that went out, but my hope was that it was about trying to provide relief to our educators, to let them know that help is on the way. You know, so did that, maybe the timing wasn't great, but I certainly can understand the strong desire to let our teachers and our educators know that things are going to be happening, that they are going to be vaccinated, and that there is a plan. So I do want to just say I understand that. My question, Commissioner, and this, you know, this is where that intersectionality between the Department of Education and the Department of Health and Human Services kind of connect here. So I'm wondering if you are aware of what is being done on the Health and Human Services side to provide access to the early childhood educators. So we have superintendents that can kind of help manage and provide access to our pre-K to 12 educators, but who is doing that for our early childhood educators and how, if you happen to know?
Well, I'll tell you, our partnership with CDC and DHHS has been very strong, and we're so grateful for the work that they've been doing, for the information that they've been providing us, and for specific staff people in particular who have been working literally overnight with our team in setting up clinics for the over 60 educators recently. The work that they're doing is phenomenal. And the fact that the governor and Dr. Shah and Commissioner Lambrou have shared with the state that we know that science backs an age-based prioritization just purely out of life-saving measures. And to recognize that they have received it's a unilateral mandate from the Biden administration to do this, to do the education workforce as a whole, regardless of age, including the child care providers, and that they've been able to hold strong that we are going to continue as a state to prioritize based on age and also meet the letter of those, the mandates in providing open access for child care providers and educators, I think just speaks very highly of a state that is as organized and prepared as any could possibly be for the dynamic situations that are coming our way. With respect to superintendents organizing clinics for their teams, for their staff members that you said, who's doing it for childcare because superintendents are doing it for their teams. In most cases, superintendents are not. I just want to be clear, nobody's coordinating it.
I'm sorry, that's not what I was trying. What I was saying is they were providing information about how educators can access the vaccinations. not that they were running the vaccinations.
Got it.
But that they were providing links for educators. And I'm wondering what mechanism has been established for our child care providers.
Right. All right. And I just want to be clear, and I think it's an important point. Most, by far, very few superintendents have been able to obtain and provide a link. I don't know of any who have done that for their staff members, because I don't think that that's available to them. I could be wrong. There may be certain isolated situations, but superintendents are not coordinating or finding links or making those available at this time to their staff members. If we are able to get a link out for the 60 plus by the end of today, they will be doing that. But that has, to my knowledge, not happened yet, Representative. However, who's going to coordinate and provide information for the childcare providers is the key part of your question. And I just wanted to clarify the other piece. And I do know that there are advocacy groups similar to the MEA who work on behalf of childcare providers. And we know that there is information on the DHHS vaccines webpage. So if you, I don't know the actual URL right now, but it's pretty simple. Usually I get there by Googling main DHHS vaccines, and you'll get to the webpage. At the bottom of the page, it says, are you eligible and how to get vaccinated? And it has a section for, if you're a child care provider or an educator, here's what to do. If you're a person over 60, here's what to do. And so that is provided on that website. And we'll do some outreach to those that we know who are in leadership roles on statewide organizations for child care providers to make sure that they all have the link to that page. It's updated quite regularly with the most new and official information. And that's where we would recommend they go to stay on top of this.
Thank you. I have Representative Stearns.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Commissioner, along with Senator Millett, I do empathize the spot that you're in. However, to say that this hasn't been anything but a political debacle would be understating the matter. 3 times this morning, you've referred to science-based, what we know by age. The state was on the right track. The federal government, who really doesn't have any say in the medical field, comes down with a dictum, and all of a sudden the science goes out the window. The communication pieces that have been mentioned by Representative Crockett and by Representative Roche are accurate. I think that this particular Zoom meeting is an indication. Why on earth does this education committee of the legislature, why are we privy to any information about medical vaccinations any more than the general populace? This could have been a statewide 9:00 a.m. Zoom for any parent, any child, any person in the state to get the latest information. So I lead up to that with, was this decision made in a vacuum, and were superintendents of schools, somebody, the MEA had information about this for some reason. Were they at the table with planning? Did it come out of the governor's office? And were superintendents of schools in on the planning to help maybe make this go smoother?
So you touched on a lot of things there, Representative Stearns. Let me just start by saying that, yes, we do know what the science is, and our CDC, DHHS, governor's office, and entire state, we have, in fact, we still would purport that the science has not changed. The Biden administration did want to simultaneously, we didn't throw out our age-based banding. We're holding true to that. The Biden administration put out the mandate that all receiving, when you say that they're not in charge of the private hospitals, as a matter of fact, they are in charge of who gets the doses and who, what comes into a state. These are vaccines that are provided by and procured by the federal government. And therefore they can say who they get to go to. So they can make that decision, and they did. And we're we're doing what I would say is a fantastic job of meeting and aspiring to meet both of these priorities, both the prioritization of the educator workforce and the continued recognition that we want to get as many older Mainers vaccinated as possible, as swiftly and efficiently as we possibly can. And in terms of decision-making, the decision-making has come from our state CDC, DHHS, governor's office in partnership with all the rest of us departments, and no special interest groups are driving those decisions. The opening of all of this to all educators of all ages is a pure function of the Biden administration's mandate based on a nationwide need for most states to open up their schools even a little bit. And I would just remind everybody that Maine schools have been offering more in-person education than almost every other state in the nation. And we're doing a really good job. And our CDC and DHHS have kept our state far safer than most other states in the nation. And I am really proud and I feel quite secure with the people who are at the helm of these decisions. That said, certainly receiving things that are outside of every one of our individual control realm. But we're doing, I think, an excellent job.
Thank you, Commissioner, and particularly thank you for the correction on my statement regarding the federal oversight of those vaccinations. Mr. Chair, might I have a follow-up?
Absolutely, Representative Stearns.
Commissioner, in your opinion, do you feel that that the education community might be put in the same light as the Mid-Maine Hospital in the fact that we have some educators that have been going to school every single day, working in close proximity with children, and we have others in the ed community, some that never ever see a child or are in cubicles working by themselves doing office functions, and other educators that have been working remotely from home with 26 years of age, great health, working from home, and they are now in the front of the line ahead of a 67-year-old, maybe with debilitating circumstance. Do you think that maybe we've set ourselves up for some legitimate criticism there?
I don't know if we'd set ourselves up for much of this at this point in terms of that whole situation. What I would say is that they're being local control. And they're being wide open per the Biden administration. Again, there is wide open access for any school worker. What we can do is we can appeal to the higher, the higher sense of conscience and decency for all educators, which is why I feel that my saying, if you're not scared to death right now, would you please wait until one of those pharmacies is offering designated doses for educators? I think most educators would do that. I don't know a 35-year-old educator who wants to clamor over a 60-year-old educator to take that spot in line. I truly would not believe that those people exist. I have great faith in the people who are working in our schools. So that's where I would have to leave it right now.
Thank you for the answer. And I believe that most would not do that, but those folks do exist, in my opinion. And
so before I get back to Representative Rhodes and Representative Millett, I just wanted to ask a couple of quick questions, Commissioner. One, is there an identification process so that if somebody does go to Hannaford Brothers, or they go to Walmart, do they show some type of identification as a school personnel?
So this is the federal program that you're speaking about right now, recognizing it's direct from the federal government to the pharmacies to the arms of the recipients. And so we have not set some kind of a procedure in place. My guess is that, yes, they would require documentation that these are Maine residents who also work in education and who, they're going to need that information, I would imagine. But I can't speak for what the procedures are. I can tell you that with respect to the one set of clinics responsible under Department of Education's partnership with the CDC and DHHS, for those clinics, we have a defined list through the NEO system, and there's going to be a cross-check to be sure that those are accessed by the appropriate people, because it's very important for us to get those oldest Maine educators and school workers through to their vaccinations that are designated for them. So that's the one that I can answer for, and I don't have the answer for the rest of that.
And also when schools have contract with community-based agencies that provide such as Learning Works in Portland, are those workers eligible for vaccination?
Under the federal
Right.
requirements. What I have, well, I don't, I probably should not, I actually don't know. I don't know the answer, so I'm not gonna engage in conjecture about it, but I think that there are pieces that could be read within the Biden administration's mandate that would.
Okay. And then lastly, this is just a comment, but a significant portion, if not a majority of childcare in the state is offered by unlicensed providers. So I'm assuming that they would not be eligible because the directive was specific to licensed childcare providers. Is that correct?
That would be my understanding because that is specifically named in the requirements. So.
Okay, thank you. So I have Representative Roach and Representative Millette.
Thank you, Representative Brennan. I wasn't going to say it again, but I know Representative Millette, my point in what I was saying was we have an outside agency who has put out something to the masses, meaning the teachers and not the superintendents. And when the superintendents get to school or got wherever, they're inundated with emails. Hey, where's my link? I need to go get my thing right now. And I get safety. I believe me, I want it. I also want the vaccination. I'm not 60 yet, but I do want that. But at the same time, I think there has to be some kind of talk of how this got to them, how it got out, how it got to places that created this, what is a mess for a lot of people this morning. And I think Representative Stern said it well, somewhat of a debacle in this, how it happened. And I don't think there's anything wrong with asking those questions and trying to find that out, because so that way it doesn't happen again. And I don't know. If you're not involved directly in the school system, maybe, right now you don't see what's going on. And it was disappointing to see that the MEA had it before our superintendents did.
I just want to say that I don't believe that the MEA did have it before the superintendents had it. They may have put out a communication. I don't know. I guess I haven't seen what you have seen that the MEA put out, but we're not providing information in advance to the MEA that is not also shared with MSMA, the school boards, and the superintendents. It's not how we've operated one day in our administration. We have been very transparent, honest, and extraordinarily communicative to the point where people are hearing exactly what we know as we know it, which is helpful and transparent, but it is it's probably forcing all of them to ride along this dynamic road with us a little bit.
Can I follow up then, Chairman?
Well, we're getting kind of short of time, and I do want to move on from that particular discussion.
But I think she just said, Ms. Macon just said something that I can read you the email from the MEA at 3 o'clock yesterday afternoon that said the MDOE sent them the information.
Sent them the information with the links?
I'll read it. Yes, MEA has been told by the MDOE that superintendents will email individual links to those educators 60 and older. These links cannot be shared with anyone else. The MDOE is only sending the exact number of doses to those priority clinics.
Yeah,
exact email.
So we sent that. The department sent that out.
It's on MEA letterhead.
We sent it out to the superintendents, and clearly they shared it with their staff members, and the MEA shared it further. But the superintendents had this in hand because they knew that they were going to have these links coming to them, and that they would be making them available to their staff. This isn't with respect to the pharmacy program or to the all ages, just to be crystal clear. This is with respect to those few, that one designated set of clinics that the department has been working with CDC and DHHS to set up for the 60 and older educators on the weekend of the 12th, next Friday. And we did send that out to superintendents, and the teachers got that funneled through their superintendents saying, hey, soon we're going to be receiving a link to send to you. And we actually did ask that everybody keep their link as close to the vest as possible, because we really want to make sure that the people for whom these clinics are being developed and intended, that they're the ones who don't have to wait in line or get bumped by somebody who is not technically eligible. And so we sent that message that you just read was from the Department of Education to the superintendents, all the superintendents. It didn't get to MEA until after some superintendent shared with their staff that they would be receiving a link pretty soon, so stay tuned.
Okay, Representative Millette.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do have a question, but two questions now. So Commissioner Macon, if I'm correct, yesterday morning you held a meeting with your usual education stakeholders, which includes the superintendents, MSMA, MEA, and MPA about this issue. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And then later in the day, you shared information with those education stakeholders as a follow-up to that meeting. Is that correct?
We've been in ongoing contact. Yeah, the specific text of that specific thing went out to superintendents over the weekend, and then we discussed it as a whole group, or not over the weekend, sorry, on Tuesday, I believe it was. And then we shared it with the whole group on Thursday morning that this is the plan, stay tuned, any minute we'll have those links and those places set up. So everybody was notified in that meeting as well. And the superintendent leadership is also reaching out to the superintendents in the field, and the MEA representative there is in contact with the field as well. So we believe that by meeting with the heads of these organizations, we are providing widespread updates and information, but we also do direct emails, and that is an example of one, to the superintendents. And that text went straight to them from the department.
Great. Thank you, Commissioner. I think that answers those questions for me sufficiently. And also, I do want to reflect that yesterday afternoon, Dr. Shah held a briefing for the whole state of Maine, all citizens, the public, and a substantial amount of that briefing was about this very issue. So in fact, this briefing that we are having today is coming after the public has already received this information. I view this as an opportunity, I had hoped, for a constructive, productive conversation about the work that's being done around vaccinating our educators. If you can, my tone is changing a little bit because I do feel as if there's a view that this is somehow a debacle or some sort of terrible thing. I think it's just, once again, an issue of communication and coordination. And so the Education Association, which does represent all of our educators in statewide education meetings, got out ahead of the superintendents. And so I think that's what we're looking at here. My question is, at some point, Commissioner, I think, I know I would, and I'm thinking others would as well, understand some of the operational issues that will or will not change based on the vaccination of teachers and educators. In particular, I'm wondering about the process of quarantining, right? So that has caused some operational disruptions because folks have had to quarantine for a pretty significant period of time. It was hard to find substitutes, et cetera. So it would be great if in your future conversations with Maine CDC, if we could get some clarity about, do things shift a little bit around that or not? And just one other little comment, our office workers, quote unquote, oftentimes have been our substitutes in this situation because of the multiple quarantining that's been happening. So while I'm, just as some of the hospitals have said, their back office people have been essential to the operations of the medical services that are provided, I would suggest that perhaps many of our office workers have been also critical to step in when our educators and administrators have had to make some quarantine calls. Thank you.
Yeah, and thank you, by the way, Representative Millette, because I meant to include in my response to Representative Stearns that there are a set of archived on MPBN, and just yesterday, it's true, Dr. Shaw was the one who gave all of this information far more eloquently and with much finer attention to detail, absolutely, than I ever could try to bring forward to all of you, but I'm here to help kind of at least provide you as much as I possibly can that pertains to education and school staff. But it was very uniformly rolled out through our state press briefings that happen on a regular basis.
Representative Stearns, and then we will need to wrap up to move on to the next order of business.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And very quickly, I want to thank the commissioner for being here this morning. And I want to reiterate my comments that were probably then overwhelmed by some negativity in that I believe she's doing her duty as commissioner. She's been a bit of a lightning rod this morning in a fairly contentious conversation. That's part of her job. And I don't, my comments don't reflect on the Department of Education. They don't reflect on the commissioner. They reflect on some other level of the administration. And I still stand by my comments that this rollout was hurried and not scientifically based.
And while that's appreciated, we are all one. The administration, we work absolutely 100% together. And so all of us are doing our best to lift a pretty bulky piece of work. But thank you so much.
Thank you.
So Commissioner, stop me when I get it wrong. But back to Representative McCray, if he's talking to teachers, what I understand at this point, if you're 60 and older and you're school personnel, your superintendent will get a link that will allow you to sign up for a clinic a week from this weekend that would give you unfettered access to getting a vaccination. And if you're 50 years old and you're a school personnel, you would be able to access a vaccination through Hannaford, Walmart, Walgreens, or another provider that may have dosage available. Is that about right?
I think that's right. Yes. So just to be like crystal clear, you're eligible to be vaccinated in our state if you're 6 or over, or if you work in education or childcare.
Right.
Any provider can make this available to education and childcare workers, and the designated retail partners selected by the Biden administration, being Walgreens, Walmart, and Hannaford, may only strictly provide their product to the education and childcare workforce.
Right. And then in addition to that, if you're 60 and older, you'll have access next weekend to specific clinics that are set up regionally.
Yes, we are doing those additional clinics for 60 and older education workers who are part of the NEO staff database. And those will be taking place the 12th, 13th, and 14th.
Okay, thank you. Representative Millette, last question.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm so sorry, but as I listen to this, Commissioner, so I get that the clinics are running off of the NEO system as a way to confirm that this individual is an educator. Is there any way to loop in the 60-plus-year-old early childcare educators as well? Because we know that they're pretty essential too.
They sure are. And let me just say that at the time that we developed this plan the existence of a definitive database at the Department of Education removed a lot of logistical barriers, recognizing that we're myopically concerned about the health and well-being of our schools, our educators, and so forth. The CDC and DHHS are looking at the whole state and public health as a large swath of, and the idea is to get as many shots into as many arms as efficiently, as effectively as possible, with no waste and no time wasted either. When we said, we've got a database, they were like, great, take this. We took this. We know it includes most everybody who works in education. In fact, public and private education are all listed. Their staff members in here. We don't have a database for childcare, but we did give that to CDC. They have used the numbers. Last weekend, they were using the numbers in immediate terms to plot strategically across the state of Maine and to match numbers of those qualified on our database with availability of doses and providers, which has been an extraordinarily complex and dynamic thing. We are unable at this point to add in, even though they're well deserving, as are many other workforce contingents and populations in our state. They're absolutely valuable, and they just were not, the numbers that we were able to use existed in a ready to go database to create a seamless, streamlined opportunity to get most people in education the opportunity who are over 60. So that's the only reason. We were not trying to be exclusive. It was a function of logistics and of the dynamic involved with an unstable supply of this vaccine. So that's the reason for the database.
So, Commissioner, I think along with everybody else on the Education Committee, I want to thank you profusely for coming here today, for providing this information. And I think we all understand that some of the dynamics, some of the variables keep changing, and that this is an evolving process. And that back to comments by several people on the committee, it's important for all of us to be communicating as much as we can on a regular basis, so that we have a common understanding of where we're going forward with the vaccination plan for school personnel. So thank you for being here today, because I think it's an important communication process and allowing us to understand and communicate to the public at least how things are going to unfold over the next week or two. And as we've learned with this pandemic, predicting very far into the future is difficult, if not impossible. So again, thank you, and thank your staff for all your work. And we'll continue to stay in communication with you. So I'll ask you at this point, do you want to take a 1 or 2 minute break and come back and start on CDS? Or are you wanting to?
I would love to go grab my coffee, and I could be right back.
Why don't you go do that and come back, and you'll be able to, we'll all shift gears from vaccination to CDS.
Thanks a lot. Be right back.
Okay. And I see that Senator Dougherty is here.
Thank you. Excited to be back. I apologize that I was late. I had a brewery engagement, but I have been listening to the entire conversation on my headphones. And I just want to say I'm glad that we were able to have the commissioner here. And I know she's grabbing coffee, but just want to thank her and everyone from the DOE and anyone from DHHS who's listening for coming forward this morning. And also, I think it's clear from our comments how important this issue is and how important the communication is and how passionate all of us are about making sure not only our schools, but all of us and our constituents are safe. So we have a long way to go. And I think I'm just going to keep my fingers crossed the entire weekend that we can increase that supply, because that's the elephant in the room. Is we're just literally not getting enough vaccines to vaccinate our vulnerable populations, our educational workforce, and those who, are 60 or over. But just wanted to add that, since I didn't have a chance to say, that before, and thank everyone, but excited to be back with all of you.
And Senator, the only point I would make now, Representative Crockett joined us as well as yourself in the middle of the discussion. So at some point you might want to introduce yourself, and Representative Crockett would introduce himself.
Fair point. I'll do a quick introduction. I'm State Senator Maddie Dockery. I represent Senate District 24, which are the communities of Brunswick, Harpswell, North Yarmouth, Freeport, and Donald. Representative Crockett.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Representative Ed Crockett from District 43, which is part of Portland and part of Falmouth. And Mr. Chair, if I may follow up on just quickly on the question you asked in the previous session about the communication of how teachers would be identified when they go to the drug stores. And I was scrambling to try to find it because I read it somewhere this morning. I don't know if it was in the Press Herald or maybe it was on social media. But there is some information out there already suggesting how teachers identify themselves to the chains with either their school badge,
right,
or their check stub. So there's information out there already that is probably confusing the communication even more.
Thank you. So, Senator, we're ready to transition now that the commissioner has her cup of coffee. We're ready to transition into the discussion around DOE. I mean CDS. I had mentioned earlier that we would listen to the commissioner's comments, and then we might take a 5-minute break before we move into the advisory committee. So I'll turn it over to you, and we'll proceed forward.
Absolutely. Thank you, Representative Brennan. And I think that sounds great. So Commissioner, whenever you're ready, if we can jump right in. Hopefully we've given you enough time to get your coffee.
Yeah, oh, got it right here. We need to, Sam, could you please let in Erin Fraser?
Yes, Commissioner, I was trying to get a word in there, but yep, I have the list. I'll let them in right now.
Oh,
Yep.
okay.
Okay, looks like we're getting it.
And if I miss anybody, Commissioner, please just give them a shout out and I'll bring them in too.
I will. I think I see all 4. So there they are. Okay. Thank you. So esteemed members of the Education Committee, the Committee on Education and Cultural Affairs, excuse me. I'd like to introduce Erin Fraser, who is our Special Services Director at the Department of Education. Sarah Forster, who is the Assistant Attorney General, who works and specializes in the Education Department. Roberta Lucas, who is serving as the Early Childhood Special Education Director, and Jamie Michaud, who works in CDS as a Erin or Jamie
Part C coordinator.
Sorry, thanks for that. And Part C being the services provided for those children birth through 3 years old. Okay, and I think to give you all a solid basis upon which the rest of the information you're going to hear today will make sense, love to invite Sarah Forster to just give us the quick overview of how federal law dictates much of what we're doing in CDS.
Commissioner Macon, before we do that, can someone just make sure I can share my screen? Because I have some visuals that I'd like to share with you today.
I'm going to turn it over to you then, Erin and Sarah, for a minute, and then I'll hop in with some historical background.
Should be all set, and we can see your PowerPoint opening.
Is it okay if I start talking?
Yes, it is.
Absolutely.
Fantastic. Good morning, Ed Committee. This is the first time I've spoken to you in this new configuration. Some of you look familiar to the extent that I can see you in little tiny boxes, and others of you I have not met yet. I'm Sarah Forster. I'm an Assistant Attorney General, and my job within the Office of the Attorney General is to advise and represent the state's educational agencies and interests. What that means is that I provide guidance and advice on what the law requires, both generally, sort of like I'm doing right now, and in response to specific facts. And if the state or one of its education agencies happens to be challenged in a legal proceeding, I, either alone or with my colleagues in the AG's office, represent you, them, whoever. Also, from time to time, I teach education law and special education law to teachers around the state. And trust me when I say there's nothing scarier than being a novice teacher assigned to teach teachers. So I'm here today to talk about IDEA, the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. And I'm going to start by saying this federal statute is enacted pursuant to the spending clause. Why should you care about that? Well, I'll tell you. The Supreme Court has told us that spending clause statutes act like a contract between the federal government and the state government. And so when you think about what we're doing here in IDEA land, think of it like this. The federal government has contracted with the state of Maine. They will give us money if we comply with the IDEA. That's how this statute works. So there are 4 parts to IDEA, and I'm going to briefly touch on 2 of them, parts C and parts B. The reason we're going to talk about these 2 is that these are the 2 parts of IDEA that involve direct services to infants, toddlers, and children with disabilities and their families. Let's start with part C. Part C is for children, actually infants and toddlers with disabilities, from birth through age 2. As part of our agreement with the federal government, the governor of the state names a lead agency. That lead agency is sort of like an umbrella. I see you have something on your screen that looks like a flow chart, but I kind of think of it as an umbrella because the lead agency has the obligation to coordinate efforts among all of the other public agencies in the state that have responsibilities toward infants, toddlers, and their families when those infants or toddlers are developmentally delayed. The output of this effort has to be that every child, infant or toddler with a disability, birth to age 2, is identified, evaluated, and if eligible, provided with early intervention services in the natural environment. That's about all I'm going to say about part C. My understanding from the little background I know about this is that you're a bit more interested in part B. So I'm going to move there. Part B of the IDEA applies to children aged 3 through 21 inclusive. And what the courts have told us, because courts are asked important questions like this, is that 3 through 21 inclusive means from a child's 3rd birthday through their 22nd birthday. In this case, the grant or the agreement between the state and the federal government has to be with the state education agency. It's not like Part C where the governor gets to pick a lead agency. So the initial federal money comes to the state education agency. Back to the umbrella metaphor. If the state education agency is the umbrella, then all kinds of other public entities called local education entities are the sub-grantees, and they are the ones who provide the direct services to children with disabilities. All of those entities, which can include what you and I think of as the school districts, they also include things like state schools, like the Maine School of Science and Math. They include, and this sounds funny since I've just told you they're called local education agencies, the state when it provides public education, such as through the Department of Corrections, or in some states, the Department of Health and Human Services. At any rate, all of those LEAs are subject to oversight and monitoring by the state, the SEA, who is in turn subject to oversight and monitoring from the federal government. So what do these LEAs have to do? A lot of things, but for purposes of your discussion, I want to focus on 2 critical central ones. LEAs need to provide a free, appropriate public education in the least restrictive educational environment. And because these terms are so important, I'm actually going to give you almost verbatim what the law requires, says each of these things are. A free appropriate public education means special education and related services that are provided at public expense, under public supervision and direction, and without charge, that meet the standards of the state education agency, that include an appropriate preschool, elementary school, or secondary school education in the state, and that are provided in conformity with the IEP required by IDEA, and that's the Individualized Education Program. So a couple of takeaways from that definition. It is legally required that every child with a disability be provided first with a preschool, elementary school, or secondary school education, and secondarily, that be modified as appropriate based on their disabling condition. The second important takeaway from this is that any program that is charged with providing this free appropriate public education must meet the standards of the state education agency. Okay, second important definition. All of these FAPEs have to occur in the least restrictive environment. That means, to the maximum extent appropriate, children with disabilities are educated with children who are non-disabled, and special classes, separate schooling, or other removal of children with disabilities from the regular education environment occurs only if the nature or severity of the disability is such that education in regular classes with the use of supplementary aids and services cannot be achieved satisfactorily. So what's the takeaway from this requirement? You can assign any entity to be an LEA that meets the definition of either overseeing, supervising, providing, operating public schools. What you cannot do is set up a parallel school system so that a child with a disability is forced to attend a different school than they would attend if they were not disabled, simply because they've been identified as a child with a disability. I'll give you a simple real-world way to process this that's worked for years with me. Suppose you have twins, Jack and Jill. Jack is neurotypical, is not identified under IDEA, and Jack goes off to school. Jill has an IEP. Jill's schooling must occur alongside her brother Jack unless her needs, her individual needs, require something different. You could not say to Jill or to Jill's parents, Jill can't go to Jack's school. She has an IEP. She has to go to a different school. And just to be clear, that same requirement doesn't matter if Jill and Jack are 3 or 13. So anyway, I know I've said a lot of stuff in a very short time. Actually, Commissioner Macon, this may be record short time for me. I don't know.
I'd be inclined to agree.
I'm just throwing that out there. I don't know if people, if any committee members, I don't know how you handle, I'm sorry, questions in this format. All I see is a little box.
No worries. I will ask at this time, does the committee have any questions? And what I will do, Ms. Forrester, is I can see who's raising their hand, so I will just direct them if they raise their hand.
Oh, thank you very much. I barely understand this format, even in my traditional court context.
No worries. So at this time, do you have any questions on anything Ms. Forrester just mentioned, committee? Seeing none, I think we can continue on.
Okay, well, so from here, I think I'll just go over some contextual points to make sure that when Erin takes it and continues along with updating you as to where we are now and goes into the most recent annual report, you'll have a context for I guess, making sense of all of that. So as you heard from Sarah, federal law, IDEA, requires the state to provide a free, appropriate public education. We call it FAPE in education world, to all disabled kids who qualify ages 3 through 22. And over 30 years ago, and I know that I have a slide somewhere with the exact dates if you're really interested in the legislative history. I think we have a slide perhaps that just shows you the scope of it. But I think there have been well over 46 sessions with bills that either came all the way forward and were then voted down or didn't make it out, but that were proposed that were effectively trying to fix what is not working about CDS. So this is a long-term pre-existing problem, and we are eager to rectify it as swiftly as possible. But I can at least say it was over 30 years ago that Maine enacted a law that required these particular CDS services, the CDS the Part B IDEA services for 3 to 5 year olds. It was CDS was created as an intermediate educational unit, or an intermediate education unit, which in a sense it'd be like a large school district to serve across the state the needs of these kids. There are presently, I think there used to be 16 regional centers. Now there are 9 regional centers across the state of Maine in CDS. CDS again being an intermediate education agency. The 9 centers provide some level of programming for direct services or outreach to the kids and families, but essentially what they do, all of them contract with private service providers in each area in order to get them to provide the services that are required legally to be made available to the children ages 3 to 5 who are in the CDS care. The inherent problem in a really broad sense is that the state has a legal, federally mandatory responsibility. And we are relying on an intermediate agency to contract with private providers to actually make that happen. And we have for many years been unable to provide all of the required services to those kids, resulting unfortunately in such things as waiting lists and kids who are underserved, because all of it depends on the availability, the capacity, the willingness of any private organization, who, by the way, can choose who they wish to serve, how many they wish to serve, what they're able to do or willing to do. Those are the organizations on which our state rests its legal and ethical responsibilities under IDEA. And so that has made it a challenge. In some cases, things work really well and kids have an amazing experience. And in other cases, it's just very inconsistent, uneven, and it has been chronically insufficient in terms of available support for all kids. We also have heard that because these are private agencies, they have tended over the years not to engage very much in necessary professional development that we can offer for free through the Department of Education around meeting IEP requirements, or how to write a legal IEP. What are the best practices for delivering services to meet particular IEP requirements? All of those trainings would require additional investments from the private providers to pay for time that's not engaging in direct service. And so that makes it very hard to ensure that there's a highly trained in the legal aspects of special education provision that's available to the providers in a field. And I'm trying to think, there, in some cases they use an IEP format, in other cases they don't use an IEP format. And Sarah said to me at one point, which really hit home, a 3 or 4 or 5 year old in a CDS program with an IEP has the same right to the same level of services and guarantee of service that a 13-year, like an 8th grader or a 10th grader would have. We would never allow an LEA, a school, to say, sorry, 8th grade child with a disability, we don't have enough capacity right now to meet your need, and so you just hang out there on a waiting list until we're ready to serve you. Nor would we be able to provide an IEP that isn't fully aligned with the requirements of the law and services. And so this is where it's that great disconnect between where the responsibility lies and where the service provision lies. There's been kind of a mismatch, and we can't guarantee availability statewide because we can't mandate private businesses to open or to expand or to do more or something different. Okay, so let's see, where are we? Many bills, I said that already, many bills over the years. I don't know if we have the JC's list. You can look at all of the titles that have come forward. What happened is that early on, there were 16 individual boards governing each of the CDS centers, and the boards were heavily populated and held, the positions were held by the service providers themselves, creating a conflict of interest. And that practice was ended quite a while back. And still though, there's a balance in this entire equation of nobody wants to shut down local businesses. Nobody wants to create hardships or unfair competition for local providers of services that are extremely challenging for all of us to get in place in the first place. Service providers don't just exist very, very commonly in our state or anywhere in the nation. We've got a real dearth of qualified service providers. Every time the effort has been made to bring CDS further into the auspices of the State Department of Education, where, by the way, in every other state in the nation, their departments of education are in charge of the direct provision of services, and they're managed publicly. Because we started this so far long ago and it was managed privately, we have been unable to take that away from the local providers. And I'm a big believer in the small businesses and the hardworking professionals who work within those small private businesses. And it gives us this very uncomfortable place where we're saying there's an economic dynamic, and then there's actually a child well-being dynamic, and we need to be able to serve all of the students and that are qualified. Therefore, Erin and her team have been working very hard to bolster the existing CDS centers across the state, and she'll be talking about that shortly. Let's see, we have I guess the final thing you need to know about right now is that in York, there was a systemic complaint filed recently against CDS for having a waiting list. And it does in fact have a waiting list. And that caused us as a state to develop a corrective action plan. And again, Erin and her team will share more about that just a second. We're very confident that we're going to eliminate wait lists statewide in the very near future. Right, Erin? Yes. And it's, we can't, it's unsustainable. We cannot allow wait lists to continue to exist. Therefore, we're going to be bolstering the public CDS centers to make provision for all of the children who currently are unserved. And pursuant to Sarah's point about least restrictive environment, this is a really tricky, uncomfortable, and challenging one for all of us. And as she mentioned, these are kids with an IEP. These are 3 to 5 year olds. They're little kids. They were always considered in some way to be, oh, those children belong to CDS. CDS will take care of them. We have our public school systems, and then we have CDS systems. However, it's come to our attention that public pre-K programs, if they are offered for free to the general population in the town, they must also be offered for free to an equitable, proportionate number of little 3 to 5 year olds who would otherwise qualify and who are presently in CDS care. And that's going to be a challenge for many school districts to get ready to receive and to serve these children. That said, usually we have, and Sarah will talk, Erin will talk about this as well, but we have a lot of currently served in private programs requiring a one-on-one aid pre-K students in CDS who, when they become eligible for the regular public kindergarten program, come in and don't need anywhere near that. They're in the general population and doing quite well. So it sets up a lot of conflicting situations here, I guess. But I just wanted you to have that whole context. And I guess each year when the bills come out to say we need to bring CDS back or into the public realm once and for all, I think there's a hesitance to bring hundreds of CDS workers in the centers across the state in as state employees. I guess we can see where that would be a challenge. And then there's also the consideration of the businesses who feel that the state would be creating undue competition for their businesses that provide services to very young children who need a lot of additional help. So at this point, do you have any questions thus far before before Erin gets into her?
Representative Millette has her hand up.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Commissioner. So just want to dig in a little bit to the on the historical end of things. You know, you talked kind of glossed over a little bit about how the wait lists started to develop. And I think it's worth digging into, because that's really what has been pushing us to make changes. And if we don't understand what was driving that, we don't accurately assess and analyze what created the situation, then I don't think any of our decisions are going to be grounded in good, you know, it needs to happen. So my question is, since I have been here in the state legislature, I am unaware of any increase in allocations to CDS until very recently, when the staff finally got some raises for their salaries. But prior to that, there were year after year after year of stagnant funding, as well as stagnant reimbursement rates to our providers. And so I would like to ask the question, has anyone ever considered whether just simply investing in the system as it was created historically at the same kind of level that we have been investing in our public pre-K to 12 system would actually allow the system that has been in place to function?
So, I can answer only some of that, and I think possibly Sarah and Erin can fill in. But anecdotally, what we hear is, well, first of all, the private settings might create a waiting list, and a waiting list of one is not okay. Just to be clear, one child on a waiting list is not okay. If there's a child in, a pre-K environment of a private provider who, kicks or bites or has, behaviors that are dangerous, they are a private business, and they're well within their rights to say, we're not going to serve this child. And so there's that fundamental baseline capacity to be able to say, we'll take this one and not this other one is one of the pieces that can create a waiting list for kids. Whereas the public school can never say that. They can never just say, oh, sorry, we're just not going to serve this student. The rates, and this is something maybe Erin has information about, but the rates that are paid across the state presently, I think, are all over the map, and they're pretty exorbitant. Like, for example, in a speech and language setting, there's a pretty high hourly rate that a specialist could charge as a private provider, and serving one child for half an hour, for example. Whereas a school setting would be able to have 2 or 3 children receiving in the same group a speech and language service where it's more enriched because they are bouncing off of other humans, which is a big component of all of that, for a more economical process. But I know that there are other, Erin and Sarah, do you know what has caused other waitlist issues or cost considerations and the amount invested?
I mean, the unmet need is because there's not enough seats that are privately held. And historically, from what I understand, CDS has been discouraged from creating its own programming. We had a big program in Portland called the REACH program. It served a lot of students. It was a phenomenal program. It's now CAD, which many of you may know. I mean, CAD took over the site, and they were forced to close in 2015 for budget cuts. So year after year after year, the expansion of CDS programming has been prohibited, but there's also not enough private business to absorb the amount of need. So we actually don't use the word waiting list. We use the word unmet need, and everybody has unmet need, and there's not a list and it isn't in order. Everyone has the need, and we're working diligently on everyone's need right now. So we are, the rates that we set are in alignment with main care rates. So at some point, there was some lobbying done for the speech therapist rate in main care, and it was brought up to about $105 an hour, while the OT and PT rates have not raised. So I know that there's some work in DHHS right now to rectify that situation and look at the rates. So right now, CDS, because we could never buy an OT or a PT for $60 an hour, we have to go over that rate. So we contract with individual service providers and base their rate on what's current in what they can get in private practice, essentially based on Medicaid formula.
Madam Chair, just a quick follow-up, if I may.
Absolutely.
Thank you. So we're not going to, I don't think, have much of a committee discussion today. We're in the listening stage. So I would love to, for when we do have that discussion, historical overview of funding of CVS over its history, and as well as rate history for providers. Thank you.
We do know that it's just in the last 3 years that the rates have come to kind of be competitive with school systems without the development of programming. So just to throw that out there.
Do you have a follow-up, Representative Millett, or all set? Do I have any other questions from the committee? Seeing none, I think we're ready to jump back in.
All right. Good morning, Senator Daughtry, Representative Brennan, and esteemed members of the committee. Thank you so much for allowing us to come, Roberta, myself, and Jamie. We are huge advocates of CDS. We're very passionate about this work, and we're so pleased to be able to bring you an understanding of what we do every day and the kids with whom we work. So just so that you can meet the administrative team of CDS, Jamie Michaud is our Part C coordinator. She specializes in birth to 2. The transition occurs at 3 years of age to Part B. She has a BS in early childhood special education and MED in special education master's degree. She has 12 years of work in CDS. I think, Jamie, speak up, 6 or 7 years beyond that in a different early childhood care agency. And she has, for the last 5 years, before we promoted her to the Part C coordinator, been the early intervention program manager. I met Jamie early on in my tenure in the department, and I learned more about Part C from Jamie Michaud in 20 minutes in a car ride than I've ever known in my entire life. So I know that you guys will be interested to hear her speak about the thing that she is very passionate about. Dr. Roberta Lucas is the Director of Early Childhood Special Education and the 619 Coordinator. She has an MS in special education and a doctorate in educational leadership with over 24 years experience in education. One of the critical factors that makes Roberta such an asset to our team is that she spent 9 years in the Department of Education on the federal monitoring team, which means that she is the expert on the MUSER, Maine Unified Special Education Regulations, and on IDEA. She is literally the go-to if you have a question about anything in the law. She's usually who I go to. So she has brings a lot of experience. And then myself, I'm the Director of Special Education, Special Services, rather, birth through 22. I have an MS in Special Education, a Master's in Education and Educational Leadership. And I have also 25 years in experience. My experience is in the day treatment setting, so the special purpose private school. That's where I got my start as an ed tech, and then I moved to the public school. I've worked in Portland and Mid-Coast, and most recently in York County. So together we bring a lot of experience to this position, to this CDS group, and we're very excited to be here and working with CDS. Very passionate about what we do. Just so you know, this is a very new team. Jamie and Dr. Roberta Lucas, they all started on October of 2020. So about 4 months ago, they've started their positions. I'm here a little bit longer. I've been in my position just over a year. We wanted to share with you our vision of CDS, the vision that we would want for CDS. So obviously our biggest commitment is the provision of high quality, evidence-based special education early intervention services compliant with IDEA and MUSER in the least restrictive environment. That is our goal as a team. One of the things early on that I dealt with and that I worked to solve was that in the state, we were considering 619 and 611 as very different entities. There's a transition, as many of you know, that occurs in a 5-year-old from CDS to the public school. But what I understand is, what I have understood this whole time is that Part B is together. And what was happening is we weren't approaching the IP the same way. We weren't an aligned team. We weren't a continuum of services. We were kind of separate. And I noticed this when I was out in the field working as well. So my first big push was like getting everybody on the same team. We're writing the same IEP. We're looking at services so that when we do that transition, we're both speaking the same language. We're both approaching the work the same way. And in that light, we provided over 50 hours of intensive training to CDS to align the IEP in Part B so that they were treated similarly. So we did a lot of work to try to get that a smooth transition, and everyone in the field, as we're transitioning kids in kindergarten in the spring, I'm hoping that people start noticing that we're more in alignment in that level. We would like to see the shift of oversight of Section 619 to the SAUs. Obviously, we want to support a very, very easy, smooth, supported transition with a clear roadmap. I think if you ask any special ed administrator in the field, they would want to have an understanding of the children who are coming into their school system. They think of those kids as their kids. They're their kids. And so they want to know what's happening, and it makes sense to educate those children in the same way that our 5 to 22-year-olds are being educated. So given the support, given the roadmap, and I've studied that PCG report, they have a pretty solid roadmap and a pretty good timeline. That would be a goal of ours, just so that we have this structural issue of CDS that's really preventing services from being provided appropriately and in a timely manner. We would be rectifying that situation. We want to increase community and private partnerships to support early intervention services. If we had more private partnerships that we could access for support, we would be putting kids there. We really would. We are seeking private providers. So we want to put that out there that we have had the circumstance during COVID that 81 early childhood education centers have closed during COVID. So that is all places that used to support children. And that's why our unmet need right now is at a critical juncture. So we want to increase our community partnerships to provide these services, because we think it's going to take partnerships to support SAUs if they take over the Section 619 services. We really feel strongly about keeping C and B together to ensure a smooth transition. C has been with B for over 30 years, as you know, in CDS, and this organization has been working hand in hand. We feel that if CDS went to a different entity, that communication and that ease of transition would be impacted. The other thing to keep in mind is that a lot of our C staff currently are providing 619 services. So we might have an OT in Bangor that's doing 30% of their work with Part C and 70% of their work with Part B. If you go ahead and try to separate those entities, there's a lot of staff that cover both. At this point, it's all hands on deck. We do early intervention. And so that would be a real challenge looking at staffing patterns and needs for if you tried to separate those two out. And then our big goal is to increase Part C services. You know, a lot of people have remarked that we don't, in the nation, we have kind of a low percentage of birth to 3. I think there's a lot of reasons for that. And we're working really hard. Jamie's going to present to you about Part C. We're working really hard to increase the percentage of students who are referred prior to their 3rd birthday. So with that being said, that's kind of our global mission. It's what we're all here to do. All the staff of CDS, there's a lot of staff that have a lot of longevity that have this commitment to children. So without further ado, I'm going to let Jamie give her Part C overview. Oops, sorry, Jamie.
That's okay. Hi, everyone. I am Jamie Nisho, as Erin introduced, and I am currently the Part C State Coordinator. Erin is absolutely correct about my passion for our Part C program in Maine, and I could talk to you about it all day long, but don't worry, I won't. I will keep it brief and just try to give you a really nice overview of what our Part C program looks like and how we've been performing in recent federal fiscal years.
Sorry. There we go.
So let's start by just talking a little bit about how Maine's Part C program is structured. So as Sarah presented, each state has a lead agency that is responsible for the Part C program. And in Maine, that agency currently is Child Development Services, or CDS. So currently CDS receives the federal Part C grant each year and is responsible for administering the Part C program statewide. The way that we're doing this is through our 9 regional CDS sites, and we deliver services through a combination of employees and contracted providers. And those two numbers are actually quite similar. At this current time, we have about 132 employed staff in Part C, and then an additional 110 contracted providers. About 5 years ago, we instituted early intervention program managers. So we have somebody at each regional site who is responsible for leading the Part C team and supervising the employees and ensuring that the contracted providers are also in compliance with our federal and state regulations. So each site, each CDS regional site has a group of professionals who are designated to early intervention and working in Part C. And these teams generally include some combination of the following disciplines. There are special educators, speech therapists, OTs, PTs, social workers. We do have a registered dietitian who now actually attends all early intervention team meetings. She joins by Zoom once a month to help with feeding concerns with our infants and toddlers. And then something to really highlight is our strong collaboration with the Maine Educational Center for Deaf and Hard of Hearing. We have a memorandum of understanding, or an MOU, with them, and they actually provide one of their staff members, who typically is a teacher of the deaf and hard of hearing, to sit in on each of our early intervention teams. So we have somebody who has expertise in training with working with children who are deaf and hard of hearing on every single one of our early intervention teams. Now let's just talk for a minute about how we provide these services under IDEA. Maine has adopted an evidence-based approach for early intervention, and it's called routines-based early intervention. This is a model that was developed by Dr. Robin McWilliam, and it's a family-centered intervention approach that takes place in natural environments. And Dr. Robin McWilliam actually came to Maine when we decided to transition to this model, and he provided direct training to our staff, and many of our current program managers in Part C were all trained directly from Dr. Robin McWilliam himself. We are currently implementing all components of the routines-based early intervention model with fidelity all across the state. So this was really important to us as we transitioned to this model, which is really considered the gold standard in early intervention. We wanted to make sure that moving forward, an infant or toddler in Aroostook County would receive the same type of service and the same quality of service as a child in York County. So statewide, all of our CDS sites are using this same model for early intervention. Now, to make sure we keep up, after we got our initial training, we knew that we had to find a way to keep staff and contracted providers at fidelity with the model. So what we do is we provide quarterly trainings on all of the components of the model for any new staff or contracted providers. And then the program managers follow up with a really rigorous system of fidelity checks where they make sure our early intervention services are provided with fidelity and that they're consistent statewide. So just to highlight really how hard our Part C staff worked to get this model implemented, Dr. Robin McWilliam has actually chosen to come back to Maine for the last 3 years in a row to hold his annual routines-based home visiting institute. And he does that at the CDS Reach site in Portland, where he actually uses CDS staff and providers as coaches for his institute. And the participants coming to learn about routines-based home visiting come from all across the country and actually from other countries. So we've had participants from Spain and Portugal come to Maine and attend this institute. Now, much like the rest of the world, in March of 2020, we were faced with figuring out how we were going to continue providing our services. So because we are mandated to provide early intervention in the natural environment, when the COVID-19 pandemic arrived, we had to do some quick thinking about how to get these services to children and families because it was no longer safe to travel into their homes or even childcares much of the time. So in mid-March, our offices closed down and we no longer were traveling to the homes. So we quickly, within a 2-week time frame, fully transitioned to offering our services and evaluations remotely. So since this was such a drastic change for not only our families, but also our providers, we were highly interested in learning how families were feeling about this new way of delivering our services, essentially through a screen. So last summer, we put together an electronic survey and we sent this to all of the families across the state who had been offered services remotely. And we received 247 responses. And of that 247, the overwhelming majority reported that they were satisfied or highly satisfied with our services being provided remotely. Now, usually we like to say that we are following national trends, right? That's typically something that we are striving to do. When we take a look at our Part C referral trend, however, we are very pleased that we are not following the national trend because nationally, most states have seen a drastic decline in their referrals to Part C since the pandemic first occurred. We did not see that in our last reporting year, which is federal fiscal year 19. And that includes data from July 1st, 2019 through June 30th, 2020. So that entire fourth quarter of our reporting period was the first 3 months of the pandemic. Despite that, we showed an 11% increase in our referrals to Part C, going up from 2,847 in 2018 up to 2,908 in 2019. So this morning I was very curious about where we're at right now, because now we're a full year into the pandemic. And I was very pleasantly surprised to see that as of today, we've received over 2,100 referrals to Part C in this fiscal year, and we still have all the way till June 30th to get to that 2,908 and hopefully surpass that. So we are working really hard to keep our referrals going, keep increasing them, and find as many children as we can for our services. Now, just to give you a brief overview of where we get our referrals, just based on those tiny little boxes you can see on the bottom, those are all the different referral sources for 2019. So we get a wide variety of referral sources. However, year after year, our top three are pretty much, sometimes they change order, but our top three pretty consistently remain physicians, the Department of Health and Human Services, and then parents and guardians who are referring their own children to Part C. Now, we're paying more attention to this than ever because we think we can learn just as much from the referral sources that aren't as active as the ones that are active. So the ones that are lower, that's where we really want to expend more energy in outreach efforts, which I'll talk about a little bit in a few more slides. So we are required under federal law of IDEA to comply with several different Part C indicators. And one of our indicators is timely provision of services. And this means that any infant or toddler who's found eligible for Part C must begin to receive their services within 30 days. And last reporting period, and remember that includes one full quarter of the pandemic, we achieved 96% compliance with making sure children started Part C services within 30 days. Another compliance indicator is looking at where we provide our services. So Sarah gave a great overview of least restrictive environment for Part B. And in Part C, she mentioned it's the natural environment. So we're required to provide services wherever the infant or toddler would be if that infant or toddler did not have a disability or developmental delay. So typically that's the home, but it can also include any community-based setting where that child would naturally be. So a child care, early Head Start, maybe even grandma's house if that's where the child is during the day while the parents are working. So we served 100% of our infants and toddlers in Part C in their natural environment for 2019. Timeliness of IFSP is the next indicator. We have a very quick timeline in Part C. From the time the referral comes in, we have to contact the family, complete our eligibility evaluation, and then if the child's eligible, we have to develop that individualized family service plan, IFSP. We have to do that all within 45 calendar days. As you can imagine, in the winter time in Maine, this is a particular challenge. We have to plan for snow days and inclement weather. But in 2019, we achieved 93% compliance. So 7% of children had their IFSP developed beyond 45 days, but they did get one. And there's a variety of reasons, particularly winter weather in Maine. Our child find numbers. So this is looking at how many infants and toddlers compared to our population we are serving with IFSPs under Part C. Erin mentioned that we know that we're a little bit low in this area. So it is a top priority for us. So we still remained below the national average in 2019 for our total number of children that we're serving. However, we did show an increase, which is really promising that our outreach efforts and what we're doing around referral is working. So we did show an increase from 2.46% of infant toddlers with IFSPs in 2018. We went up to 2.72% in 2019. So the numbers are growing, and we wish they would grow faster, but they are moving in the right direction, and we're going to continue working hard to keep that line trending up. So I also just wanted to take a minute and compare our identification rates in Part C to the national identification rates, because I found this statistic really interesting. So even though we know our enrollment is below the national average, which is shown through that light blue line on the chart, even though we're slightly below the percentage, we are following the trend almost exactly. So you can see that we start with our lowest percentage of infants and toddlers being served in the birth to 1 age range, and that is also the lowest nationally. And then it starts climbing up between the 1 to 2 year old age range. And then you can see where it spikes with the 2 to 3 year olds that fall under Part C. So even though we're a bit lower than the national average, we are following that same national trend of a sharp increase when children are between 2 to 3 years of age. Now, I've mentioned this several times already, and we'll give you just a little bit more information about what we're actually doing in our efforts to increase these child find numbers. So historically, each regional CDS site has been left to oversee their own outreach plan. So each site was responsible for conducting outreach and coordinating outreach efforts with primary referral sources. When I became the Part C coordinator, I identified a need to oversee that from the state level. So I worked with the early intervention program managers shortly after I became the Part C coordinator, and we developed a statewide outreach plan that began being implemented in January of 2021. So for this full upcoming calendar year, that will be in place. So this plan really assures that all of our primary referral sources are getting outreach from CDS annually. We also are working hard to update and expand our list of established conditions. Now, this is one of our eligibility criteria that make infants and toddlers automatically eligible. So we want to keep that list updated and as expansive as possible. And then we want to target our outreach toward those referral sources that work with children that have these established conditions, particularly the infants, so that we can get them into our services as early as possible. Now, here's something that we started keeping up with the times. We worked hard to try to make this happen for a long time. And finally got approval to do so. We have a newly created and very active Facebook page for our early intervention program because we know that we have an opportunity to increase awareness of our program through social media. And if you have a chance, I would highly recommend checking out and following our Facebook page. It has gotten a lot of positive attention since it was created this past summer. I think around July 1st of 2020 is when that went into place. Another effort that we've made to try to increase our numbers is transitioning to the latest version of our eligibility tool. So in the state of Maine, we can use the Battelle Developmental Inventory or the Bailey as our eligibility tools for Part C. And the Battelle just came out with its 3rd edition. Now, we are expecting this to increase our eligibility rates, and we are hopeful that this will happen as planned, because what Riverside, the publisher, has done is create more test items in the infant age range, which we are hoping will increase our eligibility rates for children under age 1. And they've also expanded their communication domain. And historically, it's been quite a challenge for children to become eligible under communication because the previous version really didn't expect a lot of children under age 3. So we are hopeful that transitioning to this latest version is going to allow more children to meet the eligibility criteria for our state. And then we are going to really focus in the upcoming year on strengthening collaborations that are already in place and adding new ones where we have the opportunity to. So collaborations with other state agencies and initiatives to increase referrals to Part C. The last federal indicator that I wanted to touch upon with all of you is the transition from Part C to Part B. And Erin spoke really effectively, I thought, about the transition from CDS services when a child is turning 5 and becomes eligible for public school, and what a big transition that is to go from CDS services to public school services, and how hard she's worked to make that a more streamlined process. So if we back up, the very first significant transition that happens for the child is the transition from Part C to Part B. And just like that public school transition, it requires a lot of effort and is a big deal for families to go through. So there are 3 different indicators under this one transition piece that we have to report on. And we achieved 100% compliance with notifying Part B 619 about our Part C children. We achieved 100% compliance with making sure that every child in Part C had transition steps and services on their plan before they exited from Part C. And there's a transition conference that must be held at least 90 days prior to the child's 3rd birthday. And we were able to do that in 97% of cases. We were able to make sure that was scheduled and held before that 90-day cutoff. So as you can imagine, this process of transitioning from Part C to Part B is a very big shift in service delivery for families who have been receiving services in a natural environment, and now their child might be leaving the home for the first time. And I should also inform you that it's a lengthy process. So this can start as early as 2 years, 3 months, and it goes all the way up until that 3rd birthday. So it can often be a 9-month process where our Part C staff and our Part B staff have to work side by side and really hand in hand and making sure that this transition is smooth for children and families, and that the IEP is ready to begin on the 3rd birthday if the child's eligible.
So Jamie, that concludes Jamie's presentation on Part C. It's very thorough, but if you have any questions, she's the expert.
Question from Representative Millette, followed by Representative Salisbury. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Can we back up the slides to the, yes, exactly. Thank you. So can you talk a little bit about how or what efforts you folks are making to identify the birth to 1-year-olds? I would imagine that's got to be very specific. It's very different from identifying the other age groups.
Yes, it absolutely is. And as you can all imagine, that time in a family's life with a new baby at home can be very busy and chaotic. And we're working very hard to figure out where those barriers are with, first of all, getting the referrals to Part C, and then secondly, getting families to engage in our process. So we have done some really specific things over the past year to try to increase our numbers with the birth to 1-year-olds. The most recent one that I am feeling very hopeful about is a partnership with the Maine CDC lead poisoning unit. So I mentioned that there are established conditions of risk that make children automatically eligible for Part C services. And lead poisoning is one of those established conditions. And so the lead poisoning unit from the state of Maine, we met, and I was able to talk to them about our services and implement a process where they'll be referring the children that they work with who are identified as lead poisoned to our Part C early intervention program. So in the past, that had only been identifying 40 to 50 children per year from what I understand. And then there was a change in the definition of lead poisoning for the state of Maine, and it's now upwards of 400 to 500 children. So as you can imagine, if we could get all of those children connected with our Part C program, we would be off the charts. We would definitely be meeting the national identification rates, but we definitely don't want to just put all of our eggs in one basket. So we're exploring many other avenues for this as well. Birthing hospitals, they are a big part of our outreach plan to target because many babies with established conditions will have a stay in the NICU after they're born. So trying to get NICUs on board with referring those children to us from the start is another big area that we're working towards. We also have a lot of involvement with substance exposed infants. So I'm part of the substance exposed infant task force. That's another established condition. So working collaboratively with that group across the state to find those babies and get them referred to us as well, which would make a big difference in our numbers.
Representative Salisbury.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you very much for your presentation. I've been listening via phone and now I'm switching to more live, and I apologize if this was already covered, but did you share the numbers of children that are actually served or have been over the years, or just the percentage rate?
I only shared the percentage rate because that's what we end up reporting, but I can tell you how many we serve. So yeah, it typically ranges from 800 to 900 infants and toddlers per year. And we would typically have about 1,200 open in the system, but 800 to 900 with plans who are eligible and receiving our services.
Okay. And then what about the other age groups? Do
you mean beyond their age 3, Representative?
So the infant and toddler, so I'm looking at the chart that's here now. So the birth to 1, and then 1 to 2, 2 to 3 age group. So when you say 800 to 900, is that the whole, that's the number of kids you do? Okay.
Yes, that's birth through 3.
Right. My kids are all older. I still call them toddlers. So all right, good. So 800 to 900 kids, kiddos a year is what you normally would serve.
Yes, and currently we are close to 1,000. So that is also a discrepancy with national trends where other states are seeing a sharp decline in their total number of children in Part C. We have actually increased a bit over the last year. So our numbers are the highest they've ever been.
Wonderful, thank you so much. And I heard mention that you all just started in your new roles. Is that right? Well, wow, good for you.
Thank you.
So good for you guys. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Salisbury. I have Representative Dodge.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My question is around the intersection of your work with public health nurses, and if you have found that there are counties or regions that do not have satisfactory staffing with public health nursing, and does that affect your referrals also, please? Thank you.
I think that would be a really interesting piece of data for us to look deeper into. We do have ongoing communication and collaboration with the public health nursing staff across the state, because they, of course, are another entity that is working with children in this age range, often in their homes. I'm able to look at how many referrals were made to each CDS site by public health nurses. And I think that's a great point to look at staffing shortages and see if those sites with lesser amounts of referrals do coincide with staffing shortages. So that would be certainly something I would be interested in finding out.
Thank you. Do I have any other questions from the committee? Seeing none, I think we're all set there.
Okay, we'll go on to 619. And Roberta Lucas, Dr. Roberta Lucas will present, she and I will both be presenting 619. So go ahead, Dr. Roberta Lucas.
Good morning, all. Thank you again for inviting us. I'm just going to go over some of the data that we've collected and reported in our legislative report. This here is the child count that was collected on October 1st. The numbers, as you can see, are by site, and our largest sites are Reach, which is in Portland, and York, which is our southernmost site. And we have we serve a greater percentage of children in those two sites as we do throughout the rest of the state. You can see that our smallest site is Aroostook with the fewest children. And so for Part B, just so you know that this was an October 1st count, and there were 2,101 children that were counted with plans. Today, we have 3,986, an almost 2,000 child count increase of children now with plans in Part B. So we've increased our numbers considerably since October 1st. And that's exciting for us to be able to reach those children. And just so you know, we are above the national average for identification. The national average is 6.75, and we are at 9.2% as reported on the OSEP fact page. So we are above the child count of reaching out to those 3 to 5 year olds in CDS.
So I'm going to explain this chart. There is a link that I embedded in the legislative report called OSEP Fast Facts. This is from the OSEP Fast Fact 3 to 5. And Roberta's statistic on where we fall nationally, including our least restrictive settings, are also on that page. It's very helpful information. This is the child count from 2018-19, so it's a couple years old, but I thought it was a great way to represent kind of how, because this is typical every year, of how the kids who are identified in 3 to 5 lay out compared to national averages. And the thing I want to draw your attention to is the developmental delay, which is the second tier up under the hot pink bottom layer, speech language impairment. And you can see that Maine sharply goes in at that level. And for the majority of the nation, that's a qualifying disability that many people rely on in the 3 to 5 year old 619 range. There's a couple of reasons for that in my estimation. One is that we have a pretty strict criteria of what qualifies for developmental delay. And the other is that we in Maine per MUSER have a requirement that you have to discover what the disability category is by the end of the kindergarten year. So because there's the pressure on SAUs and CDS to figure out in a short amount of time what the disability, in fact, what the specific disability might be, there is a push really to kind of identify disability prior to entering school. And we're looking at that data. We're interested in that data. We're working with our technical assistance centers. And also, you may know that we are currently revising MUSER and looking at, which is a national trend, extending the age of developmental delay up until 2nd to 3rd grade, so that there's a little bit more time that school SAUs have to kind of determine how children are being qualified for special education.
This is also from the Fast Facts from OSEP, just to also let you know our trends as we look nationally. You will see that we have more children in the early childhood educational setting being served, as the national trend is 45.5. So we are, again, above the national trend for having children in a lesser restrictive setting for those that are identified.
So I'll just add that we know that that's 60% of the child receiving services, and that most of our services through CDS are provided in natural educational centers. So that's why that number is higher than the national average.
Just wanted to review the referral process, because we receive referrals from very many sources, as Jamie also showed on her slide, from pediatrics, from DHHS, and many from families. And this slide is a preemptive to the next slide, just to let you know why some of the numbers look the way they do. Because once we get those referrals, the site personnel are the ones that process those referrals, and it's oftentimes a barrier to get in contact with a family, or a family may decline that referral. And so when we talk about initial eligibility, we have to make sure that we have the parents' consent in order to move forward with that initial eligibility. So if we look at the next slide, we'll see that the referrals are very high, especially for Part B. But what happens is that when we get to the eligibility requirement and getting this consent from a parent to sign the consent for eligibility, for evaluations, then it may stop that referral process right there. And then being found eligible also requires a consent from a parent to provide those services. So we are at 58%, 58.8% of providing services for those referrals. But again, there's a disparity because we often have barriers that prohibit us to move that child right into a service, because we must involve the parent in both phases of that referral process through to eligibility and service provision. This is an overview of our budget. You can see that we have state appropriation of $37 million. We also have 2 grants that we receive from the federal government, and then we also have a Part C grant. We have monies coming in from main care and from private insurance, tuition, Chapter 676. We have a few other little revenue sources, but our total budget is $44 million in order to provide services. That gives us money to provide services to children 3 to 5. This slide also shows that how a parent's signature is required in order to bill for main care or for insurance. We must have parents' approval to do that. We do our very best, and we do, as you can see, our income comes from 64% of our children. We receive their main care for services, and we've been able to get 23% through private insurance, and we through CDS or state funding, we paid the 13 remaining percent allowed for those services for children. We bill as much as we possibly can, and we bill, and remember that we bill main services, we bill through the state funding last. We have to be the last payer of those services.
So just to reinforce that, we're mandated to try to seek federal money before we pay state money for these services, which is why we are driving the cost through Medicaid.
And we are also looking to reenact that section 27, right, Erin? That was
yes, yeah. There's been some the PCG report noticed that there was a deficiency in main care billing Part C. And at the time that I was addressing that question, I didn't understand fully how that happened. Now I know. So in Part C, we're only able to provide for related service providers, speech, OT, and PT. There was a Medicaid billing section 27 code that included reimbursement for developmental therapies. And that was taken out of the law on March 10th, 2010. So we used to provide special education, specially designed instruction to infants and get reimbursed. In 2010, that ended. And so right now we're working with the Office of Main Care Systems to reinvigorate that capacity to bill for main care in that area.
So this is just a breakdown that's in the legislative report about contracted providers. If you notice from this chart here that Part C providers are and services provided by providers and employees is just about 50-50. But if you look at the Part B services, Part B employees only provide about 17% of the services, and we rely on 83% of the services to be provided by contracted providers. So we're very reliant upon that. And when we look at our vacant positions or the capacity we have to meet those service needs, it's a national issue, and it's a Maine issue. Here in Maine, we lack support services like our ed techs. We also lack speech and related services such as speech, OT, PT, and evaluators. We're trying very hard to be innovative on how we find ways to increase the opportunities to provide services and build our capacity. During COVID, we expanded our telehealth opportunities to provide speech and language services to families remotely, and we've invested in a mobile unit in Part B to do evaluations through having evaluators travel from site to site, supporting children who need those evaluations to get their services. So we're trying very hard to be innovative, especially during these times of COVID.
I will say we're in the third year of the salary increase for CDS that was negotiated well before anyone on this call's tenure, but that we have a 12% vacancy in positions. That used to be much greater because of the fact that, we could not compete with SAUs for salaries. It was not competitive. We are still finding, and we're looking closely at that ed tech salary range, because that's another factor right now, is that our ed tech salary range is not competitive with SAUs. Now, I know all over the state, people are not they're very challenged to find ed techs. We also have a dearth of school psychologists and related service providers. So that's chronic throughout the state. It's also chronic throughout the country. And as Roberta mentioned, we're taking some really progressive action to try to get people on board and work in special education, because it's a very rewarding field. I'll talk about this next slide. This I took from the PCG report that was done, and you've all had a chance to review it. If you look at the first top graphic, I'm really pointing out to you that you can see in this separate school item that we have a big chunk of kids that are being provided special education in a separate school. And that is, the special purpose private schools that are providing these services. And then when you go up to kindergarten, that number drops immensely. And the reason for that is because the SAUs have a lot of capacity to deal with a wide range of students, versus our private contracted providers don't have that range of skill. As Pender mentioned, we have very limited opportunity to provide any kind of education, training to private providers. They can basically pick and choose what they would like to access. They don't necessarily have access to the training that we can provide. So it's just important to understand that, and it's not saying that the special purpose private schools aren't doing great work and that they're making a lot of progress, but it's really statistically impossible for there to be that many kids in special purpose private schools and then have that number be so low. So we really think that there's, again, looking toward the SAU to provide some partnerships there and expanding programming. And then when you look at because we rely so much on those separate schools, our costs are exorbitant. So we have 17% of our kids who have over $20,000 placement, and 30% of our kids have over a $10,000 placement. The average placement for the majority of our kids, 68% of our kids, is under $5,000. But we have this percentage of kids who are above $50,000. So that's a big factor that the PCG report highlighted. I thought they did a nice job of highlighting that. And basically what that's saying is that we have too many kids in more restrictive placements. And it really is not in alignment with the IDEA, which is an end user, which says children need to be educated in their least restrictive settings. So Pender spoke to you about the corrective action plan that happened. We are really taking that we're taking that very seriously, obviously, and we're looking at implementing policies and procedures statewide so that we're looking at unmet need. So we are initiating new practices to frequently review all of our data. We are increasing communication and collaboration with parents. So we're doing 30-day or more calls and meetings with parents to help them understand where we're at in finding those placements for their children. We're reviewing and conducting an analysis of unmet need in the data per regional site. We have that. We are increasing, as I mentioned before, technical assistance to CDS, all employees, and that's really coming out of the Special Services Office. Again, the Special Services Office and CDS were disconnected in terms of those professional development opportunities. So one of the things we did was to align Part B. Roberta and I are really Part B people, and so we wanted to align those experiences for people.
If I can just jump in real quick, Erin, we do have a question from Representative Millett.
Sure.
Thank you. That caught me off guard. I was just kind of getting ready in anticipation, but I guess my question is, the CDS preschool in Saco, will they be accepting children without IEPs?
No.
So
No.
how does that get to least restrictive environment or anything different than PSPs?
It does not. And I'll talk about that, Representative Millett. I'll get to that just now, if you could let me. So we do anticipate an opening. We are madly increasing programming, but that's the caveat. It's special education programming. It's not different from special purpose private schools or separate schools. And that's because we have an immediate need. It's an emergency measure to get kids the services that they need right now. And we have to do it. It's a moral imperative. We don't feel comfortable having any unmet need in CDS. None of us do on this call. So in CDS in general, I can tell you this is really uncomfortable position for us to be in, that we have children and not services. So we are madly developing programming. It's not in the least restrictive setting, which really goes to the long-term goal of partnering with the SAUs to take ownership of this. There could be a transition of these specialized special education programs that occur over the next few years as we transition services, if we did, to SAUs, or if we just restructure how we're doing this now. In other words, in a couple of years, let's say CDS was still the operator in choice, we would eventually be creating more of a 50-50 program where we could pay for general education slots to come in. But right now, the programs that we're providing are boots on the ground, an emergency measure to take care of our unmet need, especially in the southern part of the state. So that is why we're doing it, and we're doing it at a very fast pace.
And I appreciate that, and I'm really glad that that you guys understand the urgency. A follow-up question, if you don't mind, Mr. Chair. Or Madam Chair. Oh, there you are.
Yes, absolutely. Go right ahead.
Okay. Is it a follow-up question, Madam Chair? Yeah. Okay. So then my question is, long-term, with the department looking at partnering with SAUs on 3 to 4-year-olds, if these schools don't currently offer public pre-K to those grades, what then?
We are working with a handful of districts who really want to be proactive in, I think many people think it's probably a good idea for SAUs to take over. So we have a lot of districts right now that we're partnering with, developing programming that will be opening in September. We have 3 in Southern Maine right now and a handful scattered in other areas. We're also working with the early intervention, the early learning team on the DOE for the existing pre-K programs, because we want to really analyze and make sure that they're giving, Pender talked about the proportionate amount of special education slots to their public pre-K. There is a feeling that that might not be occurring. So we're analyzing that right now to make sure that if you do have a public pre-K, then you have the amount of the proportionate amount of special education offering to that than other typical peers, because we want all of our children to be educated in the least restrictive environment, because that's what the research bears out, right? So we are partnering with districts. We have a handful that we're aggressively partnering, and we welcome any district. We're really reaching out and looking at that. And districts are really being proactive. They already want to be looking to work with these children. So that is happening. So we also immediately, though, based on this, again, this corrective action, we have hired a program development specialist. We have that person starting on Monday. She is the person that started the SACO program, and we have 2 classrooms and a modular unit going into the Arundel site, hopefully by mid-April, to also deal with the capacity issue there. Again, we would be drawing on any private provider who had space right now, but we know there's been a closure of a special purpose private pre-K in our area, and that left a lot of people suddenly. So basically the SACO program we started developing in reaction to the Morrison Center closure. And we did that well before the systemic complaint. So we're basically drawing from the kids who lost their programming suddenly in that area. And then we're also increasing capacity. We're bringing on fiscal oversight to CDS, and especially around all this programming we're developing, making sure we have the correct funds, making sure it's budgeted, and making sure we can make projections, of what our budget will need to be moving forward so that people can have a really good understanding. It's really unknown if we develop programming, the amount of the special purpose private school slots are very expensive. So if we offer a broader expansion of that programming, it's really unclear at this point what the cost savings would be if we develop that programming. And then we are partnering pretty strategically and immediately with our National Technical Assistance Center to guide us through this work and to support us. Currently, right now as we speak, the state of Maine is being trained on extended school year services by our technical assistance. So we are really vigorously providing that technical assistance to make sure that we're following the regs and making sure that we are taking care of that unmet need. So upcoming, we are increasing program availability in all regions. We're looking at that with our new position of the person who's going to be looking at unmet need. And this person we have one site, Aroostook. It has no unmet need. So all children in Aroostook get the services they need. It's a very small site. But what happened there is that there was some very innovative partnering with local agencies and groups to be able to expand and provide the amount of programming. So we have the same person working on our program expansion so that we can take that Aroostook model and then broaden it out. We have, like I said, anticipated opening of another CDS site in Arundel. And we are, as I mentioned, going to continue to provide intensive technical assistance, especially to that York site. That's being guided in a lot of we're giving a lot of attention to that unmet need. And then we are partnering, as I mentioned, with SAUs to expand preschool offering and support expansion of special education existing in public pre-K, as I already mentioned. And so that is our presentation to you in terms of what we're doing and how seriously we are taking this unmet need issue. I really, have always, as an educator and as a special ed administrator, I've always wanted to have those 3 and 4-year-olds in my care as an SAU, because I did feel that the services, having to rely on just whatever's available for services, doesn't work in terms of providing kids what they need. And to me, it's really not acceptable for any child to not be having their special education needs met. And I know that Roberta and I, Jamie, we all feel very strongly about that. We have to be doing something to provide services now. We've had 81 early childhood education centers closed during COVID. So we are just creating our own, basically. And I really want to point out that it is not ideal situation because it is special education programming. So we're meeting the need of the IEP in the letter of the law, but it's not in the least restricted environment. And so over time, we're going to look to see how we can expand our partnerships to increase access to typical peers. So at this point, we are done with our presentation and we'd be happy to take questions.
Thank you so much. I think I have Representative Salisbury and then Representative Millette. Did you have another question? Okay, so Representative Salisbury followed by Representative Millette.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. Just a quick question. When you talked about the increase of numbers that you're seeing, do you feel that it's because of the capacity to test the children and get them into the system, or do you think there's an increase of need, or is it sort of a combination of both? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think the child count number is a little bit low organically because it's one day that they look at active IPs for that day. And in the real world of CDS, there's 365 days that we're working with children. And so we have kids entering, kids being referred, kids being picked up, kids being dismissed. So I do think that there's an increase in referral. To your point, I think there's a mild increase in referral. Roberta, I don't know, due to the COVID, you're speaking about
our numbers have increased since November, actually, which is quite nice, I think, because we have more families that are now reaching out and feeling more comfortable making those referrals and being available for, because we are offering some in-person services as well as remote services. So those also have increased our referrals because I think people are ready to get back to school as usual and learning as usual.
Oh, good. Thank you so much.
Representative Millette.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Would like to dig into the 3-year-olds a little bit more as to how you see that working, considering our public schools are not enrolling 3-year-olds for neurotypical. So what then with the 3-year-olds?
So the 3-year-olds would be those partnerships between the community partnerships and the programming that we could establish. We could, again, over time, we could be, again, if we're establishing a lot of programming, it could shift to meet the need. So at some point, potentially the 4-year-olds will leave that programming and go to the SAU. The 3-year-olds would be there. We could expand to make a 50-50 program and have access to general education slots in that. So those would be partnerships, and it could be a combination of CDS programming, and it could be a combination of private programming. And we will rely on special purpose private schools for those very significant need areas.
Follow up, if I may, Madam Chair. I'm having a very hard time visualizing this, and I'm not grounded in early child developmental science in terms of when is transition better. So, I mean, one of the arguments that's been made around bringing Part B into our schools is that there's less transition, but I actually think it's now just shifting the transition, and potentially maybe even adding one more in, because then you're going to have them in one program as a 3-year-old, then put them in well, no, it's about the same. It's just, it seems that it's just a shift in the timing of the transition.
So we see Part B as being one entity under the law. And so if we brought 619 into the oversight of the SAU, there would only be one transition, and that transition would be from C to B.
I'm so sorry, but I'm not thinking statutory change. I'm thinking placement change. Our public schools do not enroll 3-year-olds. 3-year-olds fall under Part B by federal statute. So how does that work? They would continue to get the type of services they get under C, transit into B, and then they go to the schools at 4?
So Muser delineates right now, by the way, as I mentioned, we're writing Muser, that FAPE to 3-year-olds is 6 hours a week, and FAPE for 4-year-olds is 9 hours a week. And that 4-year-olds have access to private preschool. So preschool, in our law, we kind of see a 4-year-old as starting preschool. And in the Muser is out of alignment with the early learning team on the Department of Education, who kind of projects a 15-hour a week 4-year-old program. So that's kind of the preschool program. That's the public preschool programs that are being developed have that kind of a scope. We don't have universal pre-K in Maine. If you have universal pre-K, you would have 30-hour 4-year-old programs. Your 3-year-olds would have less programming because of the fact that they don't developmentally have the same, they don't have the same amount of time that a 4-year-old would. So by providing, so right now, CDS is overseeing all 3-year-olds and all 4-year-olds. If you transition 619 to the SAUs, they're overseeing 3-year-olds and 4-year-olds. Even if the 3-year-olds aren't being educated in the public school, they are providing administrative oversight and the provision of FAPE. So they're basically maintaining and making sure that the children are getting special education if they require it. And where that occurs could be in a lot of different places. It could be in community settings, it could be in private places, it could be in special purpose private schools, it could be in a lot of different places. But then the transition would be to a preschool program that is, right now, the early learning team thinks it's 15 hours a week. Muser says it's 9 hours a week. So there's some inconsistencies that we have to deal with there. But 15 hours is, a pretty solid preschool program. If you're doing universal pre-K, if the state says we're doing universal pre-K, then that would be then a 30-hour program, and that would be your offer of FAPE. FAPE would be access to 30 hours if the whole state said this is what every child should get at 4 years of age. Does that make more sense? So the transition is still going to be from Part C to Part B, and the SAU is going to oversee it. It's just where the provision of services and how much are being provided that's going to be different for a 3-year-old than a 4-year-old.
Ms. Foster, I saw your hand up. I didn't know if that was in response to this question.
Oh, I'm unmuted, right?
Yeah. Now we can hear you.
So actually, embarrassingly enough, this is in response in part to Representative Millet's question almost 2 hours ago, but also in response to a recent question. When the question was, if we study providing the current system with more money, could that do it? In other words, could that fix the problem? And I apologize if I'm not summarizing the question exactly how you would, Representative, but that's how I heard it. In other words, should we be exploring more money? And I wanted to be very careful in advising you that unless and until the system incorporates access to the places where non-disabled children receive their public education, it won't be compliant. All the money in the world can't fix that. And then the reason I thought of it in response to this most recent question is, even though I'm a lawyer, I actually read other things too. And because I'm interested in special education, I can tell you, Representative, that for the past 20 years, our 49 sister states have been struggling with exactly the question you posed. Well, what about the 3-year-olds? And during that time, they have done almost every solution in the book, to the extent that there's a book. And so people who are not me, non-lawyer actual educators, could very easily reach out and find out what it is that they're doing. But that question, what about the 3-year-olds, used to be what about the 3 and 4-year-olds, but now almost every state has at least some toehold in public pre-K. Actually, for the record, when IDEA was passed, there wasn't universal kindergarten. Thank you.
So up next, I have Representative Dodge. And then keeping an eye on the time, we will be switching to the next portion pretty soon.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And this question may be inappropriate at this time, but at some point, can someone help me understand the offerings of summer programming in various silos by age and by the transition question that Representative Millette asked? I am trying to wrap my head around that part of the services. Thank you.
So extended year services, because CDS functions as a calendar year, are offered when we have evidence of regression during breaks or inability to recoup skills that are learned during absences from education. How CDS has operated all these years, which not having enough services to provide for children, is they've basically made summer additional programming options for children to receive services. But that's kind of a condition of we don't have enough services to provide to the children. That is the condition of that. So although CDS is running year long, we actually have a calendar year. We end school just like an SAU in June, and then we begin the summer work of making up for things that we couldn't provide. And because there's less kids generally that access ESY services, we have more opportunities for people to work with those children. Also, my colleagues have been informing me that in the statute, the number of hours for preschool is 10 hours. And we're looking at that. We're looking at recommending potentially more than 10 hours for 4-year-olds. So they're just clarifying for me. And then the other thing that we want to make sure is when we're developing the special education programming, we are doing it in centers that could lead to more inclusive practices over time, reverse mainstreaming, and getting some kids in there. So we're doing them in childhood centers where we could expand that over time. But right now the immediacy is just getting the need met right now. So I hope that clarifies. Did that clarify your summer question, Representative Dodge? Yeah. Okay.
Up next, I have Representative Stearns.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to thank the team this morning. It's an incredible amount of data that you've collected, but it's also by far, in my opinion, the most focused effort that I have seen, even though it's in its infant stages, with putting the team together to solve this very difficult and very important problem. As I've always, well, for the past few years, been in favor of these programs coming under the hood, if you will, of the local school systems. However, with the caveat that sufficient state funding follow that, because that doesn't go away. CDS has been underfunded and DOE has had to bail it out, if you will, probably a harsh term, for many years, and that's not going to go away. And it won't be received well at the local level if the state funding does not follow it, because it will be looked upon by some taxpayers as an unnecessary burden. So I think that's incredibly important. But lastly, I'll finish up with the transition piece. There are really two transitions. One are the youngsters going from spot to spot or space to space, but then there's that administrative and oversight transition. And if that can be smooth, programmatic transition, that will be a great help, even though the youngster might go to a different facility. So again, congratulations. I hope that we can move this forward. It's incredibly important.
Thank you. Representative Millette?
Yep, sorry, one quick question just to help me clarify something. How many hours of services do 4-year-olds currently qualify for?
So again, we have Muser to guide us in that work, and the potential for FAPE is 9 hours a week, which is low in our estimation. So we do offer, it's not, I wouldn't say it's low, but that's really the FAPE offering we're providing for kids is 9 hours as 4-year-olds. And then we have our individualized process to say, do we need to have more access? Do we need to have more hours of access? But right now, Muser delineates 9 hours. Our statute says 10 hours. So it's individualized. We also, in our special purpose programs, oftentimes we are recommending 15 hours in those programs.
So the minimum is 9 or 10 hours, depending on where you're looking, and can be individualized above that, depending
Yeah,
on.
we are looking to clean that up in user, by the way. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Not seeing, do we have any other questions from the committee? Seeing none, I think we're going to do 2 transitions. We'll be moving one. I want to thank the department for coming and sharing this incredible amount of information, and also recognizing that you just stepped into these positions. You know, more kudos to you as well. But thank you for taking the time. I know this isn't an easy subject area, and it's something that the committee, you know, really is digging into. We're going to be switching now to the advisory committee on the independent review. I also, unfortunately, Senator Rafferty and I have another meeting that we unfortunately have to jump to. So I'll be passing the gavel virtually back over to Representative Brennan. So we'll go through the switch here, and just to remind everyone on the committee, you know, when you're popping in and out, we do have the committee meetings on YouTube. So it's been very helpful for me to go back and to review all the materials as well. So I urge everyone, I know we've been coming in and out, to go back and see the full presentation. So with that, switch over things to Representative Brennan. And
Well,
thank you very much.
thank you, Senator. And if you and Senator Rafferty get done with wherever you're going, please come back when you can. And I will echo the previous sentiments to the commissioner and her staff. Thank you for the presentation. And we will have another chance to go at this information again and at this issue again. And it'll be something that, again, unfolds as we continue to continue to address this issue throughout the session. So at this point, I will turn to our analyst, Ms. Risler, and ask her if she can clarify our next steps.
Yes, absolutely. So if Sam could let in some members of the advisory committee, as well as the Honorable former Representative Farnsworth. And I am going to, as he's doing that, I am going to give a very, very brief sort of timeline of how we got to where we are with this particular PCG report. And what I don't want to do is take up any of the time of the advisory committee, because they're the ones you actually want to hear from, not me. But especially for some of the members who were not on the committee last year, I just wanted to sort of set the stage, if you will, for the advisory committee and who they are and how they got to be appointed. So as the commissioner mentioned, pretty much every year there has been bills on CDS, and in the past couple legislatures there have specifically been some pretty big bills to reorganize CDS and to move those Part B services into the school administrative units, and to move the CDS provisions directly into the Department of Education. So during the 129th legislature, the first regular session, the committee had in front of it 2 bills. One was one of these reorganization bills, and there was another one that would have created a legislative task force to study and plan for the implementation of Maine's early childhood special education services. During the work sessions and conversations around those 2 bills, it was suggested that rather than a legislative study, that it might be better to have an independent review from an outside agency conduct a full study of what's going on in CDS and make some recommendations and possible implementation plans for the future of CDS. That got passed actually as part of the biennial budget bill in the first regular session, which was Public Law 2019, Chapter 343, Part VVVV. That particular legislation, it authorized the executive director of the legislature to contract for this independent review with the advice of the Joint Standing Committee on Education and Cultural Affairs. And it also established an advisory committee that would advise both the executive director on the development of a request for proposals, as well as the administration of the contracts. And certainly, as you can imagine, the executive director of the legislature is not necessarily the subject matter expert in early childhood special education services. In addition to authorizing for the contract and setting up the advisory committee, what's important for the 130th legislature is that law also authorized the Joint Standing Committee on Education and Cultural Affairs to report out a bill related to this report from PCG to the first regular session of the 130th legislature. So as we go through the previous presentation you heard from PCG, as we go through today, the committee should be thinking in the back of your minds whether you want to submit any legislation this session, and if so, what you might want that to look like. I don't know that you'll get to that point of the discussion today, but the committee should keep that in mind. Unfortunately, the advisory committee itself is made up of a lot of practitioners, principals, special education director, representative of childcare programs, etc. And so a lot of those people were not able to join us today because they are doing their other jobs. But I have previously sent, and I'm happy to send again, a list of who all those members are, and I'm sure any of them would be happy to speak to any of you individually that for those that couldn't be here today. Very quick timeline of the process. The advisory committee was formed and met in the summer and fall of 2019 to develop the RFP and review the proposal. They did receive the one proposal from Public Consulting Group, or PCG, which was reviewed by both that advisory committee and the Education and Cultural Affairs Committee. There was some concern at the time, and this sort of came up multiple times, but that there might be some presupposition that services should go through the school administrative units. And so the committee and the advisory committee tried to be very clear that any sort of implementation plan for the provision of services should be informed by the review and analysis, and not to go in with any idea of where the results should end up. Part of that was having the Joint Standing Committee on Education and Cultural Affairs meet upon receipt of the Phase 1 report to really review it and provide some direction to PCG on the Phase 2 implementation plan report. And that happened back in November. The committee was very clear at that time that they weren't necessarily endorsing any of particular recommendations. It was really trying to get at what the implementation plan would look like, because members felt that until they saw what that would look like, they couldn't take a position on it either way. That implementation plan is the briefing that you got from PCG back in January, so I'm not going to go through that at any length. But the advisory committee also had met to review the implementation plan and provided a memorandum to this committee with some of their discussions and some of their concerns. All of the reports and memorandum that were developed through this process are available on the committee webpage. And with that, I will turn it over specifically to the advisory committee to talk to you about who they are and some of their thoughts on this process. Nancy Cronin from the Maine Developmental Disabilities Council had been elected or appointed as chair of that advisory committee. So I did ask her to sort of be the lead for that group today.
Great. So thank you very much, Ms. Ritzler. Are there any questions for Hillary? Okay, seeing none. Sam, we will go to Ms. Cronin.
Yes, I think I've let everybody in, Representative,
Okay.
but members, please just let me know if there's somebody else.
Well, yeah,
I just admitted Nancy.
You did, okay, because yeah, we would obviously want to start with her. Hello, Ms. Cronin. Good to see you this afternoon, and my guess is that you've probably been waiting around a little bit for us to get to the advisory committee. So I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on introductions, either at committee or other people. I will leave it to you to start, and you can introduce people as you feel appropriate, and you can take it away.
Great, thank you very much. My name is Nancy Cronin, Maine Developmental Disabilities Council, and I acted as the chair of the advisory committee. What I'd like to do is briefly introduce the people that are on this call with us. Then I want to very briefly tell you where we kind of landed for suggestion and open us up for questions. So I'm not going to do a large presentation because most things you've heard of before. So Sue, and then Pete, and then former Representative Farnsworth, would you please introduce yourself briefly?
Sure. Well, whoops. Oh. I'm probably muted.
No, you're not.
Oh, no. Okay, good. And I'm in the upper left-hand corner of the screen, which is always a good place. And former member of the committee, and certainly happy to see Paul Stern's face there today, right? So I'm here and ready to listen and probably ask questions.
Great. Sue.
Hi, I'm Sue Powers from Aroostook County Action Program, representing Head Start and children with disabilities birth to 5.
Thank you. Pete. You're on mute, Pete.
Sorry about that. Thank you. My name is Pete Plummer. I'm the Chief Operating Officer of Woodford's Family Services. We're a contracted provider from CDS, and we have 3 special purpose preschools throughout the state of Maine. And but I'm here representing NAXB, who is has a series of providers that support CDS in their efforts, and you know, I offer insight from that field.
And I wanted to just skip to the end. The committee met numerous times through this entire process, but to skip to what we suggest that you do now. After going through the phase 1 report, the cost study report, the phase 2 report, we were able to come to a level of consensus about suggesting that you put 4 bills in, or consider putting 4 bills in. And I'm just going to go right through it. So Part C, while the entire advisory committee was very concerned about the low eligibility rates for Part C, and while I really do appreciate the presentation you just got from Jamie and all that wonderful data, I would be really interested in knowing what the comparison between referral rates and actually those who are eligible for the service would be. Because I know that in the past it was quite low. It was something like 20% of those who were referred actually were eligible because of our eligibility criteria. So I would be interested in seeing if that's changed or shifted at all. But the committee all agreed that we believed that PCG's recommendation to move Part C to the department made sense. We all had concerns about timelines for statutory changes, regulatory changes, and other variables, and thought that needed to be taken into consideration in a different way, but believed that it was time to move them. We also believed that there needs to be strong oversight to ensure consistency and equity across the state, and oversight to the new structure and management of any contracted providers. We had lots of conversations in the advisory committee about whether it would be better to have a cabinet level early childhood department. And the reason we thought about that is because of the immense overlap between the services provided for early children in DHHS as well as DOE. And because this is so complex, we recommended that you folks hear and collaborate with the HHS committee in making this move. The things that we are specifically interested in is how Medicaid overlaps with Part C, and how to ensure that we're getting a true picture of what a child needs according to what they might need via main care laws, which is services to ameliorate or mediate all disability, as opposed to Part C IDEA law, which is educational faith. So it's a smaller level through IDEA than what is in main care, and it's complicated. But we still think that having it under DOE makes sense. Part B, we weren't able to get as strong of a consensus. It was very exciting to get a consensus around Part C. Part B, where we were able to agree, is something has to be done about this wait list. The fact that there are so many children who have unmet needs is very dangerous. The PCG report was very clear that it is putting us at risk for litigation. And the human toll of this is also very, very strong. The committee talked at length about the long history of changes and shifts that were largely political over the last 20 or 30 years. Things about from the Appropriations Committee wondering how we were going to be able to budget and this over and under budget. Issues around once upon a time, all of service was actually provided in-house in CDS. And then there was a decision to push it into a contracted service. And then there was another decision to bring it back in-house and then contract. And what happened is we devastated our professional bodies, our workforce, with those ebb and flow of political decisions. There's been really an inconsistency of state commitment to this population. And we really believe very strongly that wherever you choose, however you go, it needs to be led from you. It needs to be led from the legislation. If not, you're kicking the can so that every single legislative body after you is going to have to think and hear more about this. And many of you know, this has been going on for a very long time. This is not the beginning of the process. I hope it's kind of the beginning of the end of the process. We agreed that there's a real issue around billing that needs to happen. SAUs are very concerned about how to bill for main care services. And if we move things to SAUs, or even if we don't, we need the idea that PCG mentioned about a centralized billing system makes a lot of sense to us. Because what it will do is it will kind of connect where the roads meet between educational need and medical need. So when you're talking about Medicaid, you're talking about early preventative screening, detection, and treatment, EPSDT. And that's the law that I mentioned has a much broader threshold of what children need and can be paid for than schools. And there's always this tension between IDEA and EPSDT around funding laws. And in 2010, when we moved, say, Section 27, I was around during all these times. I'm now one of the people who've been around for 20 years. It's very strange. But when we moved that section, it was because there were a lot of audit exceptions and a lot of schools got audited and had to pay back a lot of money. Since that time, they were very afraid of billing main care. So there needs to be something, and an idea of legislation to create a centralized billing makes sense. The PCG suggested a action around child find. We discussed how, and you saw this morning, how Part C, there is a very low, we're very low, lowest in the nation for 0 to 1 referral, for example. But we're pretty high when it comes to 3 to 5 year olds. Some of us believe that that's because we're not identifying and making enough kids eligible in the Part C world. So it's inflating the need later on. Early intervention really works and it's utterly critical. But child find is also about the community trusting whoever is handling and managing the early intervention systems. And through the years of the ebb and flow of political change, there's been a lack of trust. So there needs to be a building of trust again for child find. And we think you should just authorize that and let them fly with it. We already know they're starting to do a good job, but we need more and to look at that. So in summary, please make a decision, sanction, move to SAUs, don't move to SAUs, make a choice, make a path. Don't leave it just to the Department of Education, because that will allow the shifting to go. Create a pathway, create centralized billing, move on Part C, and let's go on child find. And we are available and willing to have questions. I do hope that was not too fast. I tend to be very wordy.
Well, thank you, Ms. Cronin. And too fast is not bad for us. At this particular point, too fast is welcome. So thank you very much for summarizing that and for doing that. And I guess at this point, I would just ask if there's anybody else on the advisory committee that would like to speak to what Ms. Cronin just mentioned.
Hi, I guess I'm the only, almost Sue Powers. Hi, this is Pete Plummer from Woodford's Family Services. I just want to share a couple thoughts. The Part B discussions on the advisory committee were much more exciting than the Part C. Nancy was correct in that. A couple things on the PCG report. The timeline that they have is, you know, in my opinion, is way too aggressive, you know, for all this stuff to happen. And you know, we're just getting off the pandemic. DOE has the 20 to 22-year-old capacity issue that they're dealing with. Now they've got the 3 to 5-year-old, both ends of the spectrum. And I don't know how they're going to put it all together. You know, and with the organizational structure, I don't think it has to be all of one or all of the other. Everything goes to the SAUs or everything stays with DOE. Maybe there's something in the middle that takes the best of both worlds. I don't think every SAU has the capacity to do everything that that is expected. So you know, we think some discussion needs to happen there. And the cost, I think the PCG report came short in identifying some of the true costs that municipalities are going to see when it comes to seed money or tuition reimbursement. That wasn't very well measured. A lot of that stuff, you know, doesn't flow. A lot of this cost doesn't flow through CDS, and so it's, but it has to flow somewhere. And if it's going to go to the SAUs, I think they need to really understand what's in there. And lastly, I wasn't going to say this, but the contract providers, you know, I think they were miscommunicated on some of the things that they do and the supports that they provide, and you know, the issues that they have with LREs and the reimbursements that they get, and not today, but at some time in the future when this goes more live and there's opportunity to testify, you know, in a public hearing setting. I'd like to add a lot of insight there.
Thank you, Mr. Plummer. Thank you. I appreciate that. And Ms. Powers, do you have anything to say? Or the Honorable Richard Farnsworth, did you have any anything that you'd like to add to Mr. Cronin or Mr. Plummer's comments? No?
I'm good, thank you.
Okay.
I would like to throw in that I agree with Pete in terms of one size doesn't necessarily fit all. And I think there needs to be built into the system a way in which the state can fill in some of the gaps that the local SAUs might not be able to handle, especially when it comes to the cost that may be involved. I know that a lot of the schools have been very concerned about whether or not this is a cost shift that basically will shift some of the burden of the additional cost for these programs over to the local taxpayer as opposed to being covered by the school. And I think personally, I think that's very unfair because our schools are, and local governments, especially given the pandemic, are going through a period of extreme duress. And we need to be very cautious about shifting more burden onto them during this process. So I think that's one of the things that I'm very interested in. Likewise, I also think that the department has a significant role in terms of working with higher education. I think I put this in the little blurb that I sent around to everybody, but with higher education in terms of working on helping to fill some of the incredible gaps that we have in terms of our professional ancillary therapy services that are so critical in this particular field. Certainly speech, occupational, and physical therapy are all fit in there, as well as what I call developmental therapy, or teachers, early childhood teachers who really are focused in on working with kids with special needs. And I know that the department has been beginning to some discussions about this, but we don't come anywhere near in terms of being able to recruit people to get into the field, in terms of being able to fill those incredible gaps, because they're so critical. And I know I've heard many times waiting lists are because we don't have the personnel, the professional staff in order to fill those gaps. And so that's one of the things that has concerned me a great deal. So I have to run in a couple of minutes because my wife has a doctor's appointment at 1 o'clock. And so I will be happy to listen for the rest of the time. I'm also looking forward to when we finally get a piece of legislation together, be able to go through it with a fine-tooth comb and be a pain in the butt during the hearings, and put in some additional concepts, because the devil will be in the details. Absolutely. I don't know if I said it also. I want to thank the advisory committee for the work that you've done, and Nancy, because it really has been valuable to have that additional expertise.
It looks like we might have lost Representative Brennan. So,
hey, it's probably a potty break.
Allow myself to ask a question. Mayhem.
Representative Millette, will you proceed?
Thank you, Representative Stearns. Pete, yes, there you are.
Yes.
We have heard on multiple occasions that one of the concerns with the existing system is that there, oh shoot, the words have just dropped out of my mouth. It's the least restrictive environment.
Mm-hmm.
The lack of least restrictive environment within the PSPs. You've heard that a number of times.
Mm-hmm.
My question is if there were a way for is there a way for PSPs to address that particular concern?
Certainly there is, Representative Millette. It's a concern that we have in the preschools that we have, especially the largest one in Westbrook, Maine. We have one classroom that does have LRE for kids that are getting ready. It's not 100% special needs, but it's a very high percentage. We don't come close to the 50% ratio, and we never have. And in today's system, we never would be able to. And it ties back to reimbursements. The only funding we get in the special purpose preschool world is, I'd say 90% of it comes from main care. We get the referrals from CDS, the parents come and visit, and we, write the IEP along with CDS. They actually write the IEP, and we review it, and we create a treatment plan from that. And there's always an issue between the hours in the IEP. You heard 15 hours earlier from DOE, which is appropriate. But then on the treatment side, on the EPSDT that Nancy was talking about earlier, those kids really deserve 30 hours and need 30 hours of treatment. It's been an ongoing issue. There's actually been a court case on that issue back in 2010. It was from DRM, and the court said that these kids get the 30 hours. But to address your point, if we're going to have, LRE ratios, we need to have some level of educational reimbursements. For these kids that are on 100% main care, and we just bill for the treatment, we receive $0 of tuition reimbursement in the preschool world. In the K through 12, there's a fee that the sending SAUs pay to the special purpose private schools in the K through 12 world, which is something we don't get. But if we had that extra funding, then we could enhance our educational LRE responsibilities, and do a better job. But the funding isn't there, and so that's really one of the biggest things, Representative Millette.
Representative Millette, may I ask a follow-up? Yes, you may.
Yeah.
If there were reimbursement from the department for neurotypical students, would they attend your program?
I would hope so. I would hope so. We have some typical kids in the program now. I got to tell you, it is kind of difficult, recruiting parents to have kids come to our program, and have a 50-50 ratio. They'd rather go to, a Head Start where there's a very lower percentage of kids. So that's a challenge. We offer discounts to the typical kids that we do have, to get them in so that we can have a typical classroom. But if we got reimbursements and we didn't have to give discounts and we could create greater percentages, then that would be wonderful. The thing that we worry about in the special purpose preschool world is all of this ongoing anxiety and change and what's going to happen in the future, and investing in the capacity and the space to be able to do these things really puts organizations at severe risk, not knowing what's happening. We'd love to be able to do it if there was a solid plan that we know was going to happen. And if we went into a 5-year lease with somebody, for the additional space to be able to do it, and I just want to highlight one more thing in the contract preschool world. The PCG report stated that, we break even. If they do, they're looking at the total financial statements of organizations. The preschools at Woodford's and the preschools that I know lose significant dollars because we try to compete with K through 12 and SAUs, and we don't get that extra tuition reimbursement. And so we subsidize these programs greatly. So yeah, we can't grow them just from a financial perspective. And that's why I think they're opening up the new school in York and maybe in Arundel. There is a something that's happening there. The kids need services, and whether or not extra funding happens in the special preschool world or in the SAU world, it's going to catch up at some point in time. And if I may, just one more thing, that they highlighted that special purpose preschools are high cost. Well, I think what they got to do is compare the special purpose preschool costs with the K through 12 costs. That's really the kids that we get. We get kids that are kicked out of typical preschools, that come to our schools. And so to compare us, and to say we're expensive, and they got to compare us with a like kind of service. And I just wish they would have done that. I asked PCG to do that. And of course, they never had the capacity or time to do that. I know I probably more than answered your question, Representative Millett, but I saw this as an opportunity to share some of those thoughts.
Representative Millett, would I be able to add to that from an Aroostook County experience?
Representative Brennan is back on.
I don't know what happened, but thanks to Sam's technical assistance, I'm back, and you certainly can follow up with the answer.
Okay, thank you. So in Aroostook County, we have developed a model that has been working very well, very successfully for the last 5 years. We've set up a continuum of services at locations throughout Aroostook County where children can access least restrictive environment based on IEPs and their needs. And move along that continuum from classrooms where they have one-on-one support into classrooms where they may have a 1-on-2 or 1-on-3 support. Those integrated classrooms, which is the second step in the continuum, they are 50-50 classrooms with 50% typically developing, 50% children on IEPs. And then we're transitioning children from those programs into regular ed classrooms, sometimes, most usually with additional ed tech support within the classroom environment to help to support, not necessarily with every activity, but to continue to support skill development for children who may need a little extra support to continue that integration. That model has been extremely successful. And from year 1 to year 3, we increased the number of children transitioning from the regular ed classrooms into kindergarten without resource room support or with very little resource room support, but transitioning into regular ed classrooms by 70%. So it can work. It's developing the model and receiving the support. We worked in extreme partnership with public schools and CDS to get the model off the ground and to get the model working. But it does work when you're able to get the strong system set up to make sure the transition for LRE is happening when it needs to.
Thank you. We next had Representative Stearns.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'm glad to see you survived a digital mutiny. Good to have you back on board.
Me too.
I wanted to follow up on Ms. Power's statements, and I think it's incredibly important that if any legislation comes out of this, or when we do move forward, that flexibility be built into it, because there are many local school systems that maybe the heuristic model, it might be another model working somewhere where the umbrella might be put over on the SAU, but for reporting and that type thing, but they might be contracting out or figuring out how to solve the problem locally. That flexibility is critical. One thing that did come up in the discussion that I think moving forward, and that is the idea that of litigation for not providing services and the state on the hook. What a shame if we pass that litigation dilemma onto local units. So that's certainly a concern. And lastly, I would ask for all the people who have been working on this, and as we continue to work, we have a dearth of professionals, a dearth of providers, if you will, and following along with almost every other industry or workforce department in Maine, anything that we could do to streamline certification for both out-of-state folks who might have certifications in another state for this type of work to come into Maine and immediately be able to work with children, and also our existing educators in the state. I remember when we went to a 4-year-old program, our early elementary school teachers were given a 1-year opportunity, if you will, to apply for an early pre-K certification, if you will. And now that doesn't exist. And I think we may have a lot of folks with experience in K1, 2, if we could streamline the focused education that they need to be up to speed with 4-year-olds, rather than make them go back to the university and do lengthy programs. I think that might be helpful to fill some of those gaps.
So any response to? No, I know there wasn't necessarily a pointed question in that, but those were several, insightful comments about where we might focus on moving forward. And Ms. Cronin, if I could just ask a question, but I just want to preface it with a little comments that, back in the 1990s, when I first became involved with CDS, the fiercest debates that we had were around the staffing issue and how much was contracted out and how much was hired staff. And I can see that that debate has not gone away. The second issue, the way that we used to do funding for CDS was to put a base amount in the first year, and then in the second year, we'd fill in any deficit that had occurred by picking the incorrect number in the first year of the biennium. So not a very good funding strategy in terms of stability over time, but that's what we ended up doing. And the other thing is, I'd like you to comment on that in 2000, we changed the standard deviation, and that in effect meant that fewer students were then eligible for services simply by saying the standard deviation in terms of your development or your need changed, which meant that you didn't qualify. And all the discussion that you've had in the last year, has there been any discussion about changing that standard deviation rate to actually increase the pool of students that might be eligible? And how far off are we in the state of Maine from other states in terms of defining that eligibility criteria? So that's one question. My second question is, when I broadly think about the work that you've done, that the consultants have done, the advisory committee has done, it falls into two categories. One category of things that we can do immediately, and then another category is things that are going to take more time. So the things that I look at that we could do more immediately are looking at centralized billing. That's something that we could do now. Doing a better job at Child Find is something that we could do now. But trying to make, as Representative Stearns pointed out, trying to align with SAUs, that's going to take more thought, and it's going to take more consideration going forward. Or, as Ms. Powers pointed out, and Representative Stearns, if we're going to come up with a hybrid model where we have some SAU involvement, but then some other models like in Aroostook County that come into play, that's going to take more thought in terms of how we fund that and how we structure that for accountability. So again, my two questions, those two broad categories that I kind of have in my head, is that similar to what you were thinking about? And if you could respond specifically to the standard deviation issue.
I remember when we changed the standard deviation in 2000, yeah, has been a lot of conversation that Maine is in the lowest category of eligibility in the nation. And there was a lot of conversation saying, yes, moving it back to where it was in 2000 makes a lot of sense. We want to identify children in the early Part C age so that they don't need to be identified for Part B. Get kids what they need early. At least that's what the science says. And then they might not necessarily need the issue later. Absolutely, that conversation was discussed with PCG, frequently discussed here with the advisory committee, and I think you guys should consider it. The reason we broke up our recommendations into 4 pieces was exactly your point, versus what can you do immediately versus what needs more time. So what are action steps? So yes, putting a bill in to debate centralized billing makes sense now. It will be a fascinating conversation that we have. Child Find, you can do right now. That might almost be a letter that says, give us a report back. I'm not even sure you need a legislative bill for that. Part C, I think you do need a legislative bill for. Move that to DOE. You're ready. They're ready. It's ready to go. And Part B, exactly like what you were saying, and Representative Stearns, it's not cooked yet. I think moving it to SAE, but you should make a statement in some kind of bill that says we want to see us plan to move to SAUs with this kind of flexible, reasonable plan in 2 years, and come and bring it back to us, and we'll comment on that plan. The issue the issue I'm going to personally, as an executive director of DD Council, have had is that we keep kicking things down the road without direction. Go ahead, go ahead and study what could be, Well, move the system towards a pathway and have them refine the pathway. So if you want to move towards SAUs, okay. If you want to move towards keeping it CDC, okay. Then we have to just take the details about how to perfect it and make it work so that we're not going to, so that we're serving our kids and they're getting what they need, and not talking about lawsuits, which is a waste of time. Did that answer your questions?
Very well, thank you. And I guess we can work with our staff analysts to try to define those two buckets a little bit more about what we can do immediately and what is going to, and I agree with you, it's defining a path, but recognizing that it's going to take more time to answer how we move down that path. And I understand the reluctance and hesitation of SAUs, but if we are able to come up with some hybrid or flexible model, it may be more appealing to SAUs to become involved. And I think, you know, the other agreement is that everybody recognizes the current structure just isn't working the way that we want it to. And so I'd like to figure out ways that we could move immediately and address those issues, and at the same time have a pathway to the future that gets us where we'd like to go. So I had Representative Stearns again, and then Representative Millette. And we are going to try to stop by one. Everybody's been incredibly good and gracious since 9 o'clock this morning, and I think we need to get done by 1 o'clock. So Representative Stearns, Representative Millette.
My apology. I left my hand up by mistake.
Oh, okay. You can ask a question now, though. You got the floor if you want it.
Representative Brennan, wouldn't you like to hear from Representative Millette?
Again, yes. Representative Millette.
Oh, Representative Stearns, that's a dangerous question. So, you know, I wasn't planning on digging too deep into a committee conversation, but I just want to, from my perspective, echo what we heard from Ms. Cronin, which is that we're running out of railroad tracks here, right? We're on, for me personally, I'm on year number 9, knowing that the system is not working. And the legislature and the executive branch, we have just been paralyzed and unable to make the necessary adjustments, investments, whatever it is that required to actually serve this population correctly. So I'm all for getting something immediately going, but I also will resist the urge for any further kind of studies, analysis, whatever. The point of the phase 2 part of the PCG effort, we were very clear as a committee in the last legislature that we wanted to have an implementation recommendation, snapshot, not snapshot, I'm sorry, working document. Representative Farnsworth and I, as the liaisons with PCG from the committee, were pretty adamant with PCG that the committee be provided with this document that will help guide any sort of efforts. Clearly, it's a recommendation. It's not final. I'm not advocating for it in any way. But what I am advocating is that we come up with something within that framework that PCG has provided to say this is the path forward, and here are the benchmarks we want to see. Because as several people have said this afternoon, the stakeholders involved are feeling substantial anxiety, from CVS employees to PSP employees, families, and we need to resolve this. It's not fair to them to let this drag on anymore. So I look forward to digging in as a committee as to what that actually looks like.
Well, thank you, Representative Millett. I, at this point, do not see any questions from any other members of the committee. I want to commend everybody for hanging in there today. It was, I thought it was very helpful to have the commissioner talk to us about the vaccination plan. And I thought the department did a really good job of identifying what they are doing as CDS. And I have major kudos and thanks to the advisory committee for the work that they've done. And Nancy, you just did a great job of summarizing and condensing and making it easy for us to try to understand what are the critical issues for us to consider as we move forward. So I appreciate your work as well as other people on the advisory committee. And it's always good to see Representative Farnsworth again. Even though we live in the same city, we don't see each other probably as much as we'd like to. So Ms. Risler, before we conclude for the day, do you have any closing comments?
I have language reviews.
Yes, you do. So
there's two ways I can do that.
You can get this done by 1 o'clock.
Well, I think that depends on you.
Okay.
So I had sent all of these language reviews out ahead of time. So the question is, did everyone actually review them ahead of time, or do you need me to pull them up on the screen one by one?
We all looked at them.
And on LDs 44, 104, 138, the fiscal note on 293, and the letter on LD 70, am I good to report all of those out and or send that letter on the committee's behalf?
Did anybody have any comments, thoughts, objections?
Questions, concerns, changes, last call?
No, what you said.
I hate to admit it, but I did not do my homework.
Representative Stearns, you are not alone.
So what do you think the appropriate sanction should be, Representative Stearns?
No recess.
No recess. Okay. Well, we already skipped lunch. So.
Well, the question is, would you like me to then bring them up on the screen for you quickly?
So Hillary, how about can we leave this and let everybody have the weekend, and then on Monday, if there are any problems, whatever, we'll just say, or if you don't hear from people by Monday, then we're okay. Does that work?
Sure. What I would ask is to let me know, and I will put this in email, I will put this in writing. Let me know no later than 9 a.m. on Monday morning.
Okay, great. That's a deal.
And at 9 a.m. on the dot, if I have not heard, they are out the door.
Okay.
So I'm going to be the brown noser and say that I did do my homework and it all looks good to me.
So
I too did my homework and I responded to Ms. Risler and thanked her.
Representative Salisbury, did you raise your hand?
I was going to say I read it. For how much that's worth. It looks good to me.
So thank you for all of those people that read through everything. And if anybody else wants to read and let Hillary know by Monday, that would be very helpful.
And you don't have to respond. If I don't hear from you, it's good to go.
And we're scheduled to meet at 10 o'clock on Monday.
That's correct.
And then we have the public hearings, and then we're doing work session in the afternoon on the budget.
That's correct.
Okay.
I have not received any additional questions or requests for more information since the last budget's work session. So if there are any, please reach out as soon as possible.
Okay. And on a final note, I'm glad to see that Representative Dodge is sticking up for her alma mater, well, Michigan. And I'm very happy to report, and I know that Representative Crockett, I didn't even think he was going to show up today because he was so embarrassed by how much Boston College lost to Florida State University the other night in basketball. And They lost by almost 30 points. And I wasn't going to make an issue of it, but since Representative Dodge was pushing Michigan, I thought it would be helpful to point it out.
Well, you're not being helpful. I did send a private message to Representative Dodge, bowing to her pillow. And you should not be piling on poor BC right now. They just fired their coach. Actually, within 30 points of Florida State, a top 10 team, not too bad. But we'll let it die there.
We will. I hope everybody has a great weekend, and thank you very much for your attention. And
Representative, I think Representative Dodge has a question.
oh, I'm sorry, Representative Dodge, you're on mute.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair, Madam Chair, I guess it's gone. There's a possibility I will be presenting a bill on Monday morning at 10 o'clock. So if I am missing, I am working with Sam about how that's the split personality thing. Have a great weekend, everyone. Thank you.
And Sam, thank you very much for all your work. You've done a great job of just making sure we're showing up at the right places at the right time. So thank you.
My pleasure, Representative. Not a problem.
All right. See everybody Monday. Take care.